Pirate God Level Cartoonist, Chapter 101-120. 101 Dark Tide Surging. Not long after the three of the Sun Pirates sat down, a crisp bell rang, echoing throughout the auction house. Hearing this voice, Roja also withdrew from the state of feeling domineering and opened his eyes. The noisy voice in the auction house gradually disappeared, and everyone raised their heads to look at the auction booth. Behind the booth, a man slowly walked out, wearing a tall hat, star-shaped sunglasses, and long pink-purple hair. "I'm sorry to keep you waiting for a long time. I'm the director of a job referral agency at Disco. Now I'm announcing that the first auction will officially start." In the warm cheers, Disco continued to explain to the crowd. "In order to celebrate the official launch of the first auction, we have collected countless naive auction items for everyone. For treason, the former noble lady who was removed from the noble name by the world government, the warrior of giant blood, and the pirate who offered a reward of millions, even the mermaids and fur tribes that rarely appear in front of humans will also appear in this auction. Of course, there are also the much-anticipated devil fruits, SSR cards, and there are only 21 big sharp knives in the world." Quote. "Then it is my honor to announce that the auction officially begins." Whoa! Immediately the whole place was boiling. "Wow, did you hear that? It's a merman whose upper body is a human and his lower body is a fish, not those mermen who walk on 2 feet. I heard. I'm looking forward to it. I must buy a mermaid today and keep it in the pool at home. Oh hoo, I want to buy a sturdier fur clan. The slaves in the family are tired of playing. I want to try what is the difference between him and a human man. That noble lady, my uncle bought it. I have been bullied by the goddamn nobles, this time I must find her back." Rich businessmen, nobles, and some people engaged in dark transactions have excitedly discussed what slaves to buy and how to use them when they go back, making no secret of their morbid desires. These bastards. Aladdin's arms burst with blue veins. He subconsciously stretched out his back, took out his weapons, and killed all these dirty guys. "Aladdin, calm down." Jinbei on the side held Aladdin's hand. "It's not the time yet." But, Aladdin turned sharply to look at Jinbei, his eyes red. Aladdin. Tiger, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly said, "Don't kill your companions because of your impulsiveness." Huchi, hearing Tiger's opening, Aladdin gasped for a moment, "Got it." Afterwards, Aladdin leaned back on the chair sullenly, closed his eyes, and couldn't bear to see his family being auctioned. Tiger and the others didn't notice. Just as Aladdin sat down, several figures who had been quietly approaching them also stopped and slowly retreated. The auction is still going on, and one slave after another has been taken away. During this period, impatient buyers will hold the slaves in their arms as soon as they get them. The ugliness of human nature blooms here without reservation. Roja has been watching all this silently, scanning the auction house from time to time to observe the surrounding situation. So far, he has discovered the traces of Diamante, Rao-ji, etc., and even said that he has found a guy who looks like a soldier in the crowd. While collecting information, an idea gradually emerged in Roja's mind. Slaves, population, nobles. One after another information appeared in his mind, and then connected in series, but he still couldn't grasp the illusory conclusion. At this time, the crowd suddenly boiled, and it turned out that the auction finally came to an end, and the auction of the final product began. Ladies and gentlemen, compared with previous auctions, everyone has received a full harvest. But I want to tell everyone that the real surprise has just arrived, and now we are going to start the much-anticipated finale auction. Speaking of Disco himself exiting from the backstage, one wrapped in red cloth. This is our first finale product, one of the only 21 great sharp knives in the world, a legendary magic weapon tempered by lightning. Big sharp knife, thunder sting. Call _ One lifted the red cloth, and suddenly a long sword in a blue scabbard appeared in front of everyone. Compared to the name of the thunder sting, everyone has heard of it. According to legend, The previous owner of this peerless weapon can even cause lightning reactions between heaven and earth when waving it. When waving it in thunderstorms, it is even more it can attract thunder and lightning and defeat the opponent. Not only that, the sharpness of this magic weapon is also beyond imagination. From the following point of view, it is not an exaggeration to rank this magic weapon in the supreme knife. A strong man with a famous sword will be able to win everything. I don't know which strong person can get this honor today and become its next master. Big sharp knife, thunder sting. The starting price is 50 million berry. Each increase shall not be less than 10 million berry. Start the auction now. Accompanied by the knock of the disco hammer, the sound of bidding suddenly rang out in the crowd. 60 million berries. I'm out. 80 million berry. 100 million bellies. 110 million berries. Quote. In the end, Lasting was bought by a pirate leader with a scar on his face for 230 million berries. As soon as Lasting started, he hurriedly left the venue. Watching the scarred man leave, glancing at the guys who followed quietly, Roja hooked the corner of his mouth. Takes out a delicate phone bug and rolls out a number. I want thunder stings. Understood. After a simple sentence, Roja hung up the phone. If the other party is a decent person, Roja may hesitate, but if the other party is a pirate, Roja has no psychological burden to kill. Of course, the more famous knives, the better. Of the second finale, the red-haired Shanks was bought by Tezzolo for a sky-high price of 500 million berry, which shocked everyone present. After getting the card, Tezzolo also got up and left, and disappeared from people's sight after a while. Looking at the shocked people who still sold 500 million berry for one card, Roja really laughed. Doflamingo and Tezzolo really advertised him well. As soon as this auction ends, the news will definitely spread all over the world, and the sales volume of Dream Talk magazine will surely usher in a new peak. When the noise of the crowd gradually subsided, Disco solemnly walked out with a plate. The long-awaited moment has finally arrived, and I am honored to introduce to you the last auction item. The incarnation of the Sea Devil. As long as you eat it, you can obtain a treasure of great power. Superhuman Devil Fruit, Childlike Fruit. Chapter 102 Tit for Tat. At the booth, Disco was still making a splash for the fun fruit. I believe everyone already knows about the ability of the childlike fruit, but I still want to introduce it to you. As long as you eat this fruit, you will have the magical ability to turn any person or animal you touch into a toy. And the most important thing is that as long as you eat this devil fruit, the ability person will stop growing instantly. Always maintain the appearance when you eat the fruit. Having said that, Disco pretended to be envious and raised the childlike fruit in his hand. What a tempting effect! As long as you eat it, you can stay young forever. Disco suddenly laughed slyly. Of course, you can also eat it for your own girl slave. In that case, she will always be a girl. Think about it, the body of a girl, the soul of an adult. Tisk tisk, I don't need to say more about it. Children's fruits. The starting price is 200 million berry, and each increase shall not be less than 20 million. Start now. Eternal youth. Hearing this effect, the eyes of everyone present lit up, but when they heard the starting price, many people still looked gloomy and beat their thighs in annoyance. The price of 200 million berry is not something that ordinary people can come up with. However, at the moment when the disco hammer rang, someone still started to bid. 220 million. 240 million. I'm out. 295.36 billion. 400 million. With the continuous increase of the price and the promotion of the support arranged by the auction house, the price was raised to 400 million berg in the blink of an eye. But after 400 million berges, the competition among buyers is less intense than at the beginning. At this price, no matter how rich they are, they have to consider whether it is worth it. 500 million. Just when the buyers were entangled and the scene fell into silence, a man in a black suit with an ordinary appearance suddenly raised the bidding card and raised the price to a new height. He raised the price by 100 million berry all at once, and there was an uproar at the scene. Many people secretly shook their heads and sighed. 500 million berry is beyond my budget. I can't afford it, I can't afford it, I don't have 500 million bells in all my belongings. Oh, forget it, I originally planned to go back and feed my concubine, but now it seems that there is no drama. It's just a superhuman fruit, but at this price, I can even receive 2 superhumans for 500 million berry. Speaking of which, who is the bidder? I've never heard of it. Whatever he is, it is estimated that he is the spokesperson of which big P force. Everyone at the scene thought that the auction was over, and the fruit of childishness was about to be taken away by this man in a suit who suddenly appeared. Tilda. A low and magnetic voice suddenly sounded from the corner of the auction house. 600 million. Silence. The whole place was dead silent. The sudden bidding shocked everyone in the audience. Even Disco, who was about to hit the hammer and confirm the deal, couldn't help but stop. Everyone present turned their heads in unison, looking at the source of the sound, wanting to see who was so bold, and actually bought a fruit with 600 million berries. Feeling the attention of everyone, Roja did not move, and looked at the booth with a cold expression. No one is bidding now, is it time to hit the hammer? Hearing this, Disco secretly looked towards the backstage, his eyes full of inquiries. At this moment, Doflamingo was sitting in the gap in the backstage screen. Hearing Roja's bid, even Doflamingo was stunned. According to the plan that Doflamingo had prepared for a long time, the SSR and the big quick knife Thunder Sting were really sold, but he had no plans to sell the remaining childlike fruits. The reason why it was put on the auction was purely to create momentum. To this end, he specially arranged a trust, mixed with the crowd to bid, and bought the childlike fruit. Anyway, it is also the price that his own people call. The higher the call, the happier he is, just in time to become famous. But what Doflamingo never expected was that he had already reached the sky-high price of 500 million berries, and there were still people who increased the price, and 1 plus was 100 million berries. This Nima he was a little moved. 600 million berg, can do a lot of things, okay. After thinking about it for a while, Doflamingo tapped the phone bug beside him twice. Soon, the man in the suit who had previously bid 500 million berry raised his placard again. 700 million berry. The man in the suit's hands were shaking when he called for the price. 80 million. Roja followed without hesitation. 800 million. No hesitation yet. Roja's voice just fell, and the auction house was boiling again, and everyone whispered while looking at him. Who is this person? He took out 800 million berries so easily. That's right, it won't be a lunatic, let's make a random price over there. Impossible, the career referral agency has a very deep background. I heard that in addition to the support of the dark world, even the world government has support behind it. If he dares to bid arbitrarily, I am afraid that he will not wait until he walks out of the auction house. Dead. But this is too rich, is it the first heir of which country? While the men were whispering, all the women present looked at Roja with fiery eyes, eager to swallow Roja. Even if Roja is wearing a mask at this time, he can't see his face clearly, but it doesn't matter. If they can easily take out 800 million bellies, they dare to go even if they are a pig. At this time, even the reporters in the auction house who were invited by the professional referral agency to make a campaign became crazy. Originally, they thought that the cards of 500 million berries were already in the headlines, but they did not expect that another 800 million berries would pop up, and it looked like it could be even higher. This gentleman offered 800 million berry, is there a higher bid? Disco almost trembled as he uttered the words, but out of the corner of his eye he swept toward Doflamingo. What about the boss? As everyone knows, Brother Doflamingo was also moved at this time, but when he thought that his future plans might require the ability of childlike fruit, he gritted his teeth and tapped the phone bug beside him again. 900 million. I'll pay 900 million. After the man in the suit called for the price, Doflamingo stared at Roja. At the same time, I kept praying in my heart, hoping that Roja would stop bidding. Calling on again, he was really afraid that he would not be able to bear it, and promised to sell the childlike fruit to Roja. However, what he never expected was that Roja didn't ask for the price, but looked at that caretaker and sneered. 2. Chapter 103 The Dragon Man Appears. Care. Hearing this, everyone immediately looked excitedly at the man in the suit who had been bidding with Roja, with anger on their faces. Although it is the default practice of everyone to say that the organizer will arrange several trusts in the auction to increase the transaction price, it does not mean that they like this rule. In previous auctions, if Tuo was caught out, beaten and kicked out, it would be easy. If you encounter a violent buyer, you may be beaten to death, and the auction house will not pursue it, it will only calm things down. At this time, the buyers in the auction house did not do anything due to the background of the human auction house, but their anger has spread among the crowd. I didn't think so before, but now that I think about it, he does look a bit like Toto. That is, every time the auctioneer delays the transaction, this guy will bid. He must be waiting for an order. Ah, I remembered, this bastard raised the price with me just now. It cost me 500,000 bellies in vain. Yes, I remembered it too. This guy called the price several times, and each time he quit when the transaction price was approaching, and he didn't buy anything. Facing everyone's responsibilities, the man in the suit panicked and glanced at Disco subconsciously. Seeing that Disco was silent and didn't mean to help him, the panic on his face became more obvious. Who is Tuo? Who is Tuo? Don't you wrong me. The man in the suit stood up hysterically and pointed at Roja. Why do you say I am Tuo? Show me the evidence. Evidence. Roja gave him a cold look. Isn't the evidence on you? The next moment, a cold light suddenly shot out from Roja's palm, and in an instant, it brushed past the man in the suit and slid straight into the quilt in front of him. Om! The flying knife stuck on the back of the chair and kept buzzing, and the people on the chair were terrified. What's on your collar? Phone bug. It's a tiny phone bug. This bastard is really a Toto. Grab the phone bug. The frightened man in the suit was instantly pushed to the ground by the buyers. Only then did he realize that his collar had been cut by the flying knife just now, revealing the phone bug inside. However, even if he was knocked down by the crowd, the man in the suit overturned a group of people with his strong physical fitness and was about to run. Seeing this, Roja couldn't help but smile coldly. If the man in the suit bites himself to be the spokesperson of a certain force, and the phone bug is the channel for him to communicate with his superiors, Roja really can't do anything about him. But the man in the suit is now being seen through, and he wants to escape, even if it is not a support. Brother Doflamingo, you chose the wrong person. Roja sighed and sat back in the chair, admiring the way the man in the suit struggled to escape. At this moment, Doflamingo in the backstage angrily crushed the phone bug beside him, and gave the order with a gloomy expression. Kill him. The next moment, just as the man in the suit picked up a buyer again, a gunshot suddenly sounded. Suddenly, a blood hole appeared on the head of the man in the suit, and he fell on the seat. The crowd instantly quieted down. Disco, the auctioneer, withdrew his musket and bowed apologetically to the crowd. I'm sorry to disturb everyone's interest by letting such a deliberately disruptive guy in. Q. In order to make up for everyone's spiritual loss too, and we will compensate 500,000 berry for all the guests who participated in the auction this time. As for the guests who are maliciously bid up, we will trade at the price before the bid. Dow. Hearing this, a smile appeared on everyone's face. The reason why they are so angry is just to gain more benefits. Since the auction house has bowed its head, naturally no one will make trouble again. How about my goods? Roja said suddenly. Restart the auction from 400 million, I don't know if you are satisfied. Disco said almost through gritted teeth. Okay. Roja nodded and held up the sign, 420 million. Fuck, Brother Doflamingo in the backstage couldn't help but scolded, not only for Roja's actions to find out Two, but more for remorse. If I knew it earlier, I sold it to him when I asked for 800 million. Earn nearly 400 million in less. Doflamingo's heart was bleeding. That's 400 million. Diamandi, send someone to target him. After the auction is over, find a place to snatch the childlike fruit for me. Yes, young master. At this time, in the auction venue, no one bid with Roja anymore. After several times of instigation by Disco to no avail, he could only knock the hammer listlessly. 420 million once. 4,200 million twice. Is there no more price increase? With a sigh, Disco raised the hammer again. 4,200 million 3 times, and now I declare. Wait a minute. A voice suddenly came from the rear of the store. Huh. Roja looked back, and when he saw the bidder, he couldn't help frowning, and a heartfelt disgust emerged spontaneously. He was dressed in white, wearing a bubble hood, and his face was full of disgusting arrogance. It is Tianlong people. It's actually a celestial dragon. Why did the Tianlong people come here? Hide my wife, don't let the Tianlong people see it. The crowd in the auction house shrank their necks in unison, and hugged the female relatives beside them in their arms, preventing them from showing their faces. If they are caught by the Tianlong people, no matter if they are rich businessmen or nobles, they can only watch their female relatives being taken away, but they do not dare to resist. This is the power of the world nobles, the Tianlong people. Dragon people. Tiger's eyes were red, and he stared at the Tianlong people, but the fear of the general in his heart prevented him from making any rash moves. It looks like it's not too late. Charles rose, who was still a teenager at this time, with a snot, walked off the slave as a means of transportation, swaggered to the front of the booth, and raised his chin to the Disco. No matter how much money, I want this devil fruit. Hearing this, someone immediately looked at Roja with sympathetic eyes. In their opinion, Roja has lost the fruit of childishness that he is about to get. Even if Roja is rich, it is impossible to be richer than the Tianlong people, and it is even more impossible to rob the Tianlong people. Looking at the Tianlong people who suddenly appeared, Disco was also blank and confused. If Roja buys the childlike fruit, they can still try to get it back, but if it is taken away by the Tianlong people, it will be really troublesome. Although Doflamingo threatened the world government to grant him the position of Chihuahai by robbing the heavenly gold tribute to the Tianlong people. But robbing tribute and robbing things from Tianlong people are two completely different things. Tianlong talents don't care how the tribute is transported, where it goes, and what accidents have passed in the middle. For them, they only need to receive the tribute. But if you grab something from the Tianlong people, then this person will be hostile to all the Tianlong people. Just when the Disco was at a loss, a note suddenly flew from the background and flew to the table in front of him against the ground. Disco was stunned for a moment, then glanced at the backstage quickly, and when he saw Brother Doflamingo nodding his face, he looked overjoyed and quickly looked down. After a moment, Disco raised the microphone with a sinister look. I never imagined that His Excellency Charles Luosheng would come in person, which is a great honor for me. The Disco flattery made Charles R.O. Saint grin and grin. However, in a hurry to talk about Disco, he bowed deeply to Charles Luosheng. But I'm sorry, in the auction just now, we have sold the childlike fruit to the gentleman there. Atonement. Seeing the sudden gloomy expression on Charles Rosin's face, Disco was startled, but he still laughed sinisterly. However, I think that gentleman should be very happy to dedicate the fruit of childishness to the great Charles Rosin. Sir, do you think so? Saying that, Disco pointed his finger to Roja in the distance. When he pointed to the past, the eyes of everyone present also followed the past. Among them are sympathy, pity, and a little gloating. At this time, in the eyes of everyone, Roja has become a fool who has lost both money and money. Give it to me. Charles Luosheng was stunned for a moment, and then he suddenly realized that he looked at Roja and smiled arrogantly. Untouchables, I will give you a chance to give me the devil fruit, and I will forgive you for the offense of buying the fruit before me. Chapter 104 Suffocated Ming. On the backstage of the auction house, Doflamingo looked gloomily at the surrounding Don Quixote family members. I will manipulate the masked man to attack the Tianlong people in a while, and you will take the opportunity to create chaos. Be sure to take back the fruit of childlike fun. Yes. Get ready now. At this time, Roja smiled coldly, looking at the silk thread that was quietly wrapped around his body. Want to create a conflict between him and the Tianlong people, then satisfy you. It just so happened that he was too lazy to pay attention to the chop of Charles R.O. Saint. Following the manipulation of the silk thread, Roja stood up silently. Charles Luo Sheng saw that Roja not only did not answer his question, but also stood up and frowned suddenly. Untouchable, what are you doing? Beside Charles Luo Sheng, the dragon guard has drawn out his gun and pointed at Roja. Seeing the suddenly tense atmosphere, everyone in the auction house couldn't help but panic. Holding the grass, what is this person going to do? You won't want to fight with the Tianlong people, will you? Hurry up, let's go, something is going to happen. Yes, let's go. If this lunatic conflicts with the Tianlong people for a while, everyone will be held accountable in the future. While the crowd was talking, there were some buyers who saw that the situation was not good, had lowered their bodies and quietly slipped away from the side. Boss, what should I do? Jinping whispered to Tiger. Wait a minute and see what's going on. Tiger looked solemnly between Roja and Charles Luo Sheng, his eyes flashing dangerous light. If this masked guy had a conflict with the heavenly dragon, maybe he could take advantage of the chaos to kill the heavenly dragon. On the other side, Charles Luo Sheng saw that Roja was silent and did not answer his own question, his face suddenly gloomy. Untouchables, I'll ask you more. While speaking, Charles Luo Sheng took out a gun from his arms and pointed it at Roja. However, before he could shoot, he saw Roja jumping high from his seat, and after a few vertical jumps, he should pounce towards Charles Rosent. Shoot, protect the Lord. The dragon guards fired without hesitation. However, most of the bullets were evaded by Roja's strange steps, and the remaining bullets that were not evaded would often touch the silk thread quietly laid by Doflamingo in midair and deviate from the trajectory. Almost in the blink of an eye, Roja had come within 10 meters of Charles Luo Sheng, and even 2 of the Tianlong guards died in his hands. And behind him, a buyer of an auction house, seeing that Roja really dared to fight with the Tianlong people, and was still a strong man, suddenly screamed in horror. If the Tianlong people have an accident here, everyone present will be blamed. Screams and roars rang out in the auction house, and everyone panicked. Run! Get out of here! I don't know who shouted, and the panicked people woke up instantly and ran out in a hurry. They have to leave this nightmarish auction house, or even the Chambord Islands, or it will be over when the Navy arrives. While the auction house was panicking, Roja still started killing in Doflamingo's manipulation. That's it. That's it. Kill Charles R.O. Saint. On the backstage, Doflamingo groaned hideously and danced his fingers non-stop. He seemed to have foreseen the scene when the Tianlong people were attacked by assassins and killed the auction house. This is the beginning of the chaos. Just use the blood of Tianlong people to fill the hatred in his heart. Go to hell. Brother Doflamingo's eyes flashed with hatred, and his fingers slammed down. Boom, 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 boom. The sound of dense breaking sounded, and the straight silk thread in his hand softened instantly and fell to the ground. Doflamingo stared dully at the broken thread on his fingertips, and for a moment his head couldn't turn. Why did this stop? The next moment, lightning flashed in Brother Doflamingo's mind. He raised his head hastily, and looked at the front desk with a grim expression. At this time, Roja has already stepped on the booth, and a few meters away is the childlike fruit placed on the case. And behind him, is the comatose Charles Luo Sheng and the disco who was nailed to the knife. Damn it! Doflamingo cursed angrily, swept out countless threads in his hands. Do it! The members of the Don Quixote family who received the order rushed out of every corner in an instant. However, they had just taken the first step when huge ice walls appeared in front of them, blocking everyone's way forward. When Doflamingo broke through the ice wall, he saw Roja and Estes casually standing on the platform at a glance. At this time, even if Doflamingo was angry, he could see that something was wrong. Not only the ice wall that appeared just now, but the momentum on Roja's body alone made him feel an indescribable sense of depression. "Stop fighting." Roja looked at Doflamingo playfully. "Who the hell are you?" Hearing this tone, Doflamingo also reacted. "I am afraid that the masked man in front of him knows him and is very familiar with him." The ceremony of immortality. Roja smiled slightly. "Do you know who I am now?" Doflamingo's pupils shrank, and he was about to exclaim subconsciously. "R.O. Shish." Roiby made a mute gesture. "You know it in your heart, and you still want to fight now." My day NM, if Doflamingo knew the word MMP, he must say it now. If it is someone else, Doflamingo can still have some ideas, but if Roja, who once crushed the entire Don Quixote family by himself, he really does not dare to have any more ideas. "I can't beat it at all, what else to play, not to mention that Roja's current momentum is stronger than before, I don't know how much." Doflamingo subconsciously raised a hint of retreat in his heart, but when he thought that the fruit of childishness was still in Roja's hands, he felt a little bad. "Can you give me the fruit of childishness? I will be of great use." "No." Roja rejected Doflamingo very simply, and put the childlike fruit into the storage space. "You." Brother Doflamingo glared, his chest heaved violently several times, and in the end he was discouraged and didn't say a word. Just when Doflamingo was tangled on 5.3, a pirate suddenly came over. "Young master, the Navy has been alerted, and they will be rescued in 3 minutes at most." Hearing this, Doflamingo frowned, took a deep look at Roja, turned around and left. "Everyone retreat, leave the chambord." Everyone from the Don Quixote family followed Doflamingo and walked out. Seeing that Doflamingo was about to walk out the door, Roja suddenly shouted as if remembering something, "Don't forget the newspaper you promised. If you don't give it to me, I will pick it up in 2 days." In the distance, Doflamingo stumbled under his feet, his steps quickened, and he disappeared outside the door in a blink of an eye. "For you, fuck you. If you make such a big event, you will have to be held on for a few more months at least. Otherwise, he will be unhappy." Chapter 105 The Assassinated Dragon. "Young master, what about the auction house?" Diamante asked worriedly as soon as he walked out the door. "Give up." Brother Doflamingo said these words almost word by word, his face as hideous as a devil. This time, there was a case of a guest attacking the Tianlong people in the auction house. As the organizer, the human auction house could not escape the guilt. Thinking of his investment in the auction house and the childlike fruit taken away by Roja, Doflamingo felt like a knife in his heart. These two are extremely important parts of his future plans, and now they are lost at the same time. Many plans have to be redone, and the losses are extremely heavy. That bastard Roja. Remembering that everything was caused by Roja, Doflamingo wanted to turn back immediately and fight Roja to the death. Yet he could only think about it. Doflamingo felt an unprecedented sense of powerlessness on Roja's body, and even this sense of powerlessness was already showing signs of turning into a shadow. Just as Doflamingo was thinking about it, a series of neat footsteps suddenly appeared directly in front of them. Rows of sailors in navy uniforms quickly appeared in front of Doflamingo. Without saying a word, they fired directly. "Young master, what should I do?" Buffalo in the Sky shouted in panic while dodging bullets. "Break through. Hurry up before the general arrives. Kill anyone who dares to stop him." Doflamingo's eyes flashed with murderous intent. "Yes." In the auction house, Roja Yuzai sat on the table on the booth, as if waiting for something. Estes stomped on Charles Rosent a little bored. "Why didn't you kill him?" In these days of contact, Estes has almost figured out Roja's temper. With Roja's heartfelt disgust for Charles Roja just now, he should kill Charles Roja directly. Don't kill him first. Roja smiled faintly, and when he looked at Charles Luo Sheng, his eyes suddenly became cold. Just killing him is too cheap for this guy, I have better way. Then why are we still here? Waiting for the navy that those people said just now. Estes was a little excited. Are we going to fight? Roja smiled and nodded, and it could be seen that this period of time really suffocated Estes, and it happened that he was also testing some of Estes' combat power. Among the people who will come in a while, it is estimated that there will be a very powerful guy, and he will be yours at that time. Good. Estes moved his wrists happily, looking impatient. At this moment, two dark shadows suddenly climbed Roja from the beam of the auction house, and rushed straight to the two of Roja. At the moment when they started, Roja's eyes narrowed, and the snow on his waist came out instantly. Sheath. Estes reacted faster, raised his hand, and dozens of ice guns suddenly appeared and burst out. Almost at the same moment, layers of ice walls appeared around the two of them, sealing off all the surrounding spaces. The two figures falling from the sky, seeing the ice spear coming from the sky, fell head-on without dodging or evading. One of them, holding a halberd, spun around abruptly, pulling away the ice spear. The other person closed his fist at the waist and then punched it vigorously. 5,000 tile-positive fists. He hit the ice wall fiercely, and the thick ice wall shattered in an instant, just when Estes thought the opponent was going to make a frontal raid. A sturdy figure suddenly stood up from under the booth, holding a musket, and opened fire. Boom! The metal projectile shot out with gunpowder, but what surprised Estes was that the direction the other party was aiming at was Charles R.O. Saint, who fell on the ground. The thoughts flashed in his mind, and Estes' face darkened instantly. At this time, she also reacted. The two people who fell on the beam were just feigning attacks, which made her mistakenly think that the enemy's target was her and Roja. The real target of these people has always been Charles Luosheng. Damn it! Estes' face tightened, even she couldn't intercept the fired bullet. Success. Tiger, who had been in ambush all the time, looked happy. He is finally going to kill a Tianlong. However, at this moment, a blade suddenly appeared and inserted straight in front of Charles Luosheng. Ding! The bullet was blocked by the blade and rolled out. The scene fell silent for a moment. Tiger looked at the master of the blade dully, Roja, and was speechless for a while. Stop bullets with a knife. Did you make a mistake? Tiger never thought that someone's knife could be faster than a bullet. The Sun Pirates. Roja put the knife on his shoulders, his face gloomy. Has anyone told you that disturbing other people's prisoners is an act of declaring war? On the other side, Jinpei and Aladdin were also blown away by the embarrassed Estes, who hurriedly protected Tiger on both sides. Who is your excellency? I just want to kill that dragon, no offense. Tiger considered for a moment before speaking cautiously. At this time, he also saw that Roja and the two were by no means mediocre, and everyone was powerful and terrifying. This is my captive, it's impossible to give it to you. Roja really refused, but I'm curious, why did the Sun Pirates come to the human auction? No comment. Even if I want to tell the world about the days of your last trip, you won't say it. Roja's tone was still flat, but his words made Tiger's complexion change greatly. Looking at Roja in horror, Tiger's mind was in chaos. Being caught by human beings and being a slave of the Tianlong people for a period of time is the biggest stain in Tiger's life. Except for Princess Otoji, even the companions of the Sun Pirates are rarely known. Now, the man in front of him has said it in one bite. Tiger stood on the spot, struggling for a long time in his heart, and finally spoke slowly. We plan to monitor this auction house for a long time and track and intercept the auction slaves. Of course, we will not save those who have done many evils. If there is a chance, we will also intercept some slave traders who provide slaves for the auction. Why not just destroy the auction house? Because even if we destroy this auction house, there will soon be a second auction house. It's better to nail this one firmly and save as many miserable slaves as possible before the auction house collapses. Hearing this, Roja couldn't help raising his eyebrows, and glanced at Tiger in surprise, and his original estimate of Tiger increased a bit. Unexpectedly, Tiger, who looks stupid and black, thinks so much. But I think about it, if Tiger is really not smart enough, I am afraid that he will be blocked by the general and killed. How can he think like this now, wandering around with the people of the Sun Pirates? You know, he once made trouble with Mary Joa, freed countless slaves, and has long been on the Navy's top blacklist. Just as Roja and Tiger were talking, there was a loud sound of footsteps outside the auction house. Then, a voice amplified by a loudspeaker sounded outside. Listen to the people inside, you have been surrounded, and now I order you to immediately lay down your weapons and hand over the hostages. Chapter 106 Esters vs. Akainu. It's finally here. I've been waiting for them for a long time, but it seems that the general hasn't arrived yet. Roja stretched his waist and couldn't lift himself up a little. If the Navy can obediently shout outside, it means that the decisive force in the Navy has not yet come. Otherwise, with the temper of the three generals, I am afraid that they will rush in long ago. What are you going to do? Follow us and try to kill the Tianlong people, or break out of the siege? Tiger stood in the same place, glanced between Roja and Charles Luo Sheng tangled, and finally sighed. We break through. Tiger raised his head and glanced at Roja. We will help you deal with the Navy outside. I hope you don't let the Tianlong people be rescued by them. After that, Tiger walked outside with Jinbei and Aladdin. Thank you then. Roja waved his hand. He was really not interested in those sailors outside. It was good to have Tiger and the others to help. 10 minutes later, when Roja and Estes walked out of the auction house, they saw the collapsed Navy outside the auction house at a glance. After noticing that most of the people in the Navy were just unconscious or seriously injured, and no one died at all, Roja couldn't help but pouted. Tiger's kindness is really no one, and he still really abides by his oath, will not kill anyone. Has the powerful guy you said come yet? As soon as he came outside, there was no fight to fight, and Esters was a little anxious. It's coming soon, Roja responded casually. At this time, a touch of scarlet appeared on the horizon in the distance, and before the silhouette was seen, the air around Roja and the two suddenly rose a few degrees. This temperature. Roja looked at the direction of the fire, Akainu. The next moment, wearing a navy cloak, wearing a red suit, followed by a large number of navy red dogs, appeared in Roja's sight. After a few tens of seconds, the naval force led by Akainu had come to the vicinity of Roja and the two of them, standing 100 meters away from them. You two are the prisoners who attacked the Tianlong people. Akainu glanced at the scene with a dignified expression. After noticing the damaged ground, forest, and the degree of injuries to the sailors, there was a trace of contempt in his eyes. Akainu, who has experienced hundreds of battles, can see at a glance the general battle process. This group of navies was gradually defeated, and the strength of defeating their enemies was not too strong at best. It may not even be comparable to the lieutenant general of the headquarters. For him, it was the level of being able to suppress at will. Dao. However, what puzzled Akainu was why there was not even a single dead man among the defeated navy. After thinking about it, Akainu didn't even think about it, so he just didn't think about it. Anyway, attacking the Tianlong people is a capital crime, just kill them directly, FBU. I thought it was someone who dared to attack the Tianlong people, but I didn't expect it to be this level. Akainu raised his head proudly. How do you want to die? From the very beginning, Akainu had no intention of arresting him. Huh, Roja tilted his head in confusion. What's going on? Is Akainu acting like this now? Hey, Roja, this is the guy you said. Estes licked his lips excitedly. Can I do it now? Okay, let's go, be careful of his elementalization. Roja admonished, then took out the scabbard and walked towards the naval array. Since Akainu has become Estes' opponent, he can only clear the soldiers. Akainu smiled grimly when he saw Roha and the two men walking towards him aggressively. If you don't know what you can do, then kill me. As he spoke, the temperature around Akainu suddenly rose. Looking around, even the air around him fluctuated because of the high temperature. If ordinary people are exposed to such high temperature, even if it is difficult to breathe, even a Navy officer will not be able to exert his full strength because of such high temperature. However, Roha and Estes didn't seem to feel it. Their expressions were as usual, and there was no reaction. Seeing Roha's state of being different from ordinary people, Akainu smiled grimly. No response is just right, he is just having fun when he fights. Raising his hands, Akainu's arms suddenly turned into lava, and then several groups of burning lava spurted out of his fists, covering both Roha and Roha at the same time. The scalding lava, exuding a rolling heat wave, swept in, and wherever it passed, the vegetation was all yellow. Facing the oncoming lava, Roha didn't seem to see it, still carrying the scabbard and walking forward leisurely. The arrogance was evident. Seeing Roha's contemptuous attitude, Akainu pouted coldly. Lava is not so resistant. However, just when the lava entered Roha but within 10 meters, countless ice crystals suddenly bloomed, wrapping the flying lava, forcing it to die out. Big man, your opponent is me. Estes gave Akainu a cold look, then stepped forward, past Roha, and rushed towards Akainu. Women. Akainu couldn't help but stunned when he heard Estes' voice, and then snorted coldly, be against the Navy, even women will die. In the face of this woman with similar abilities to Aokiji, Akainu's anger does not come out of nowhere. As soon as the arm was raised, Akainu's right arm instantly turned into a huge lava hand. With a single wave, the huge lava hand spanned a distance of more than 10 meters and punched Estes. Big fire. Under this record, even a large iceberg with a height of 100 meters will be smashed and evaporated in an instant. Facing the big lava hand that was burning the air, Estes had an excited smile on his face, and endless ice poured out. Ice and lava constantly intersected between the two, and the explosions continued. In just a few tens of seconds, the two have fought dozens of times, and massive amounts of water vapor permeated the space hundreds of meters in radius. At this time, Roha, after taking down all the navies lightly, sat leisurely on the mountain of human flesh built by the Navy soldiers, lazily watching the fight between the two. Estes' strength is stronger than he imagined, and he has been able to fight Akainu for so long, but he is only slightly inferior. Speaking of which, Estes and Arturia seem to have said that her strength has improved a lot since she came to this world. Roha touched his chin and thought, Arturia's strength has increased, and it can also be understood as a relationship from the suppression of the moon world, but he doesn't understand Estes. Chapter 107 Akainu Runaway. System, do you know what's going on? Roha asked in his heart. Each world has a unique world law, and the many restrictions of the world law will affect the strength of summoned creatures. Close black lens bracket. Sure enough. Roha nodded, can you be more specific? The laws of each world have different restrictions on everything. For example, in the world where the host used to be, no matter how hard a human being, it is impossible to run 100 meters in 7 seconds. Exercise can be achieved, this is the embodiment of the limitations of the laws of the world. In this case, the magician of the magical world will lose the ability to cast spells if he travels to a world without mana. If a knight in the martial arts world travels to the fantasy world, the laws of the world will change, and the many restrictions of the laws of the world in the original body will disappear, and it will be easy to break through the original limits. Hearing this, Roha couldn't help frowning. Then if I summon a mage from the moon world, won't she be able to cast magic? No, Arturia has never mentioned the lack of magic power. It stands to reason that the magic power generated by the dragon's heart is not enough for her to use it for so long. Host, please don't worry, all summoned creatures will be specially transformed by the system when they are summoned. 510 If it is a summoned creature such as a magician, the system will automatically adjust the magic power circuit in its body to convert the consumption of magic power into physical strength or mental power. That's not bad. Roja nodded with satisfaction, closed the system, and re-examined the battle between Estes and Akainu. At this point, the battle between Estes and Akainu was almost heated up. Around them, there are rugged ice clusters and burning lava everywhere, and the original appearance of the earth has long been lost. In the blink of an eye, the two fought again, and ice chips and lava flew around. Suddenly, when Estes was retreating, he accidentally stepped on the lava that Akainu had deliberately spread, and his feet suddenly staggered and his body was unstable. Great opportunity. Akainu's eyes lit up. How could he, who had been through hundreds of battles, miss this opportunity, glared at his feet, and pounced on it. Ning dog. The big lava hand was burning with fiery flames, with a terrifying explosion of burning air, and suddenly blasted out. However, Akainu's hand had just been stretched out, and a dazzling sword energy suddenly flew out from the side, cutting the lava big hand in half with one blow. Janao. Akainu's pupils shrank, hurriedly took a few steps back, and cautiously looked in the direction where the sword energy was flying. Seeing Akainu looking at him like an enemy, Roja scratched his head a little embarrassedly, and took back the snow. Missed, you continue. Roja spread his hands and signaled Akainu to fight. So that's hand slipping. The hand slipped out a sword energy, and it interrupted Lao Su's hand so accurately. What about a liar? Akainu's mood at this time cannot be described in words at all. If he can find time, he will definitely have an endless duel with Roja. Although Akainu was a little worried about Roja's action and didn't move, Estes wouldn't get used to him, and after his body stabilized, he rushed up again. After being slashed by Roja's sword energy, Akainu felt a little bit tied up when he fought again. It was another battle of ice and fire, and Estes was temporarily backed away. Even Akainu could not help but show a look of exhaustion on his face. I thought it was just to wipe the butt of the Tianlong people, but I didn't expect to encounter an enemy of this level. Just the woman in front of him has already put him in a hard fight, and he can't tell the winner in a short time, not to mention that there is a Roja who doesn't know the depths by his side. Damn, where did these two people come from? Never heard of them. Akainu recalled in his mind for a long time, but he couldn't remember at all that there was any information about the two people in front of him in the Navy. These two people seemed to have just popped out of nowhere. After being interrupted by Roja's sword energy once again, the opportunity to expand the victory was interrupted, and while Akainu was angry, there was a hint of retreat in his heart. He could see that the man was borrowing his strength to train this crazy woman. If the fight goes on like this, when the man starts to fight, he will really not be able to walk in the face of the two people's attack. Akainu, who has the intention to retreat, fights and retreats. However, he had just withdrawn a few steps when he found that Roja was already holding a knife, blocking his only path. General Akainu, are you going to run? Roja leaned against the tree and looked at Akainu lazily. Even if Roja is covering his face with a mask now, Akainu can feel the teasing and contempt in Roja's words. In a flash, Akainu's anger burned. He has never been treated like this since getting the lava fruit. It is a shame for a dignified general to be treated like this. The more he thought about it, the more angry he became. He raised his hand, and several groups of lava attacked Roja's direction. Aren't you going to fight? Good. I'll give you a good fight today. Akainu, whose self-esteem was wounded, erupted with unprecedented power. The air around Akainu suddenly burned, and countless lava slowly flowed from his body to the ground. The next moment, countless lava flew towards Roja and Estes. The furious Akainu will fight with 1 against 2. Ouch, I'm actually angry. While avoiding the lava, Roja still didn't forget to tease Akainu. If you can't beat it, you will be angry. Sakazuki, aren't you still a child? In the face of Roja's verbal attack this time, Akainu did not respond, but just used a pair of lava hands to attack again and again. He could see Roja's temper clearly, and the more he ignored him, the more vigorous he became. He simply didn't say a word and just hit. In the face of the sudden outbreak of Akainu, even Estes would inevitably retreat, wandering to seek opportunities. The three people present knew that such an outbreak would not last long. The final result depends on whether Akainu kills Roha during the outbreak, or accepts a tragic failure after the outbreak is over. The earth is howling, the forest is trembling, and endless fire is rising. At this time, the entire Chambord archipelago was shrouded in the rage of Akainu Sakaski. Seeing that Sakaski was completely runaway, Roha couldn't help frowning. His original intention was just to test Estes' strength. There was no need to fight with Akainu here. If Estes was injured, it would be a big loss. Do you want to use Halu stone gloves? This idea just popped into my mind, and it was ruthlessly smothered by Roha. If nothing else, the rolling lava around Akainu is not something that can be easily broken through. After dodging Akainu's lava slap again, Roha suddenly jumped to the tree and looked into the distance. I saw that where Roha was looking from afar, a golden light appeared and disappeared, galloping towards them. Chapter 108 Mokobatmo. Kazuna. Roha frowned, suddenly looking at the door of the auction house on the other side. After noticing the lack of that fractional officer in the fainted navy, Roha couldn't help but pouted. Playing off, just noticed Akainu's side, but did not see that the navy actually woke up. Now it seems that Kizaru came in a hurry after receiving the notice of Akainu's hard fight. Estes, use that move in 10 seconds. When the two crossed, Roha spoke in a row, indicating Estes. Although he didn't know what happened, Estes chose to believe in Roha. After a few jumps in a row, Estes kept away from Akainu, and Roha took advantage of the situation to block in front of her, blocking Akainu's offensive for Estes. What are you doing? Sensing the unusual behavior of the two of them, Akainu's eyes narrowed, and he exerted his power with all his strength. Meteor shower. Countless lava was ejected from Akainu's arms, and after rising high into the sky, it quickly fell in the direction of Roha and the two. This is also Akainu's strongest move. With this move, he can even destroy the army. And now, these countless belied showers are all falling towards Roha and the two of them. At this moment, Estes' voice suddenly sounded in the field. Everything in the world will freeze in front of me, Mokobatmo. A icy cold suddenly appeared, sweeping all the spaces in all directions. The next moment, with Estes as the center, the surrounding huge space fell into a strange stillness. The grass no longer swayed, the flames went out in an instant, and everything around was eroded by the strange cold current and never moved. Estes slowly opened his eyes, quickly came to Roha's side, and picked him up. Then glanced around. Seeing this, Estes raised his eyebrows. It stands to reason that in the space of Mokobatmo, all creatures will be frozen, and only she should be able to move freely. However, now both Roha in his arms and the powerful lava navy are slowly moving, although the magnitude is not large, but it is indeed moving. Suddenly, Estes seemed to feel something turned her head, and when she looked up at the sky, Chi-Kong couldn't help shrinking. Above the sky, a golden light was slowly falling towards the ground. When he felt the powerful power in the opponent's body, Estes understood Roha's purpose for letting her use Mokobatmo. It turns out that there is more than one such powerful enemy. Thinking of this, Estes couldn't help but glanced at Roha with admiration. As expected of her man, he even counted the time when the other party arrived. In 10 seconds, it was when the golden light arrived, and Mokobatmo just covered both of them. Seeing that Mokobatmo's time was about to run out, Estes no longer hesitated and started to retreat with Roha. But within a few seconds, the two had disappeared without a trace. A few seconds after they left, Mokobatmo also began to disappear. Boom, 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 boom. The boundless flame meteor fell to the ground, bringing endless roar and destruction. The kiwi who fell from the sky also appeared beside Akainu. Looking at the empty space in front of him, Akainu's pupils shrank, and he couldn't help but punch the big tree beside him. Damn it. Akainu's face was extremely gloomy. They actually let them run away. Oh, how did you get beaten up like this? Kizaru put his hands in his pockets, looking at the embarrassed Akainu in surprise. It was the first time he had seen such an Akainu. Don't worry about it. Akainu snorted coldly, turned around and left. He couldn't swallow this breath, and he had to mobilize all the surrounding navies to thoroughly investigate the entire Chambord archipelago. Seeing the back of Akainu leaving, Kizaru pouted, whistled, and laughed playfully. It was very interesting to see Akainu, who had always been extremely strong, deflated. As for who made Akainu like this, he didn't bother to care, it was too troublesome. If it wasn't for Warring States orders, he wouldn't even bother to come here. A few minutes later, Roja and Estes returned to Shachi's bar. When Shachi heard that Roja couldn't help beating the Tianlong people and also beating the Admiral Akainu, he was shocked, and his mouth opened slightly and couldn't close for a while. As an intelligence dealer, of course she knows the name of Akainu Sakazuki, and she knows how terrifying Sakazuki is. However, such a person was actually beaten by Roja and Estes. It really made her a little unbelievable. But after thinking about it, Roja and Estes came from that powerful and mysterious dimensional brigade after all, and Shachi believed it a little, and turned to ask for details. When she got to know Roja and Estes, who had been hiding their identities from beginning to end, her tense heart eased a little. After some inquiries, Shachi couldn't help but told Roja, "You should not go out during this time. After all, you have beaten the Tianlong people and the generals. The lackeys and navy of the Tianlong people must not let it go, and it is estimated that a large number of people will be dispatched. Manual control of the Chambord Islands followed by a thorough search." Quote, "It's okay, Aunt Sha, don't worry, just at this time, I plan to learn domineering from Rayleigh." Roja nodded. As for what he was thinking, only he knew. Seeing that Roja recognized the importance of the problem, Shachi couldn't help comforting. "You don't have to worry, anyway, I have been here for so many years, the guys in the Navy can't find me." "Thank you." This time Roja is sincerely grateful. He knows that although Shachi is easy to say, it is easier said than done to avoid the Navy's investigation. Even Shachi is estimated to have to pay a lot. For this elder who truly treats him well, Roja respects him from the bottom of his heart. Chapter 109 God of Dragons. At the same time as Roja and Shachi were talking, the naval forces led by Akainu also completed the confluence with the forces led by Kizaru and began to search the Chambord Islands. Area 1, outside the human auction. Watching the Navy soldiers carry Charles Luo Sheng away, Akainu snorted coldly, picked up the phone bug and started reporting the situation to the Warring States. When he finished reporting, the phone bug fell into a strange silence. "Have you seen the other party's appearance?" "No," Akainu replied in a low voice. "Are there any phone bugs for taking pictures beforehand?" "No." Akainu's face darkened a bit. He originally thought it was a sure thing, who would set up a phone bug. "So, in this operation, apart from knowing the general capabilities of the other two, you won't gain anything. Just let the other party run away. You also seriously injured most of the naval forces with you in the past. Sakazuki, you what the hell is going on in your head?" Quote. Hearing the growl from the phone bug, Akainu opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. In the final analysis, the mistake this time was all because of his underestimation of the enemy. If he knew about Estes' strength and called the nearby Kizaru for support early, then even if he couldn't keep those two people, he wouldn't fall to the present situation. On the other side of the phone, after Sengoku scolded him, he gradually calmed down. "Are those two really that strong?" "Very strong." Akainu replied in a deep voice, "That woman's strength is only one line weaker than mine, but the most troublesome thing is her trick that is similar to the time stop, but according to my communication with Kyabu, that trick is not the same. It's not really time stopping, but using some extremely low temperature to freeze biological activity in a short period of time. It can be completely resisted with special techniques, at least it won't be powerless to fight back." "Well, I know that the headquarters will start to study countermeasures. The warring states responded solemnly. How strong is that man? That man. Akainu's eyes showed a look of recollection. He only swung a few sword chi from the beginning to the end, but from the power of the sword chi, the opponent is at least the peak of the swordsman, and even the great swordsman has it. Possibly. Well, I see. By the way, what about applying for a reinforcement search? Akainu asked hesitantly. It is impossible to add more members to you. Recently, in the New World, the Beast Pirates have not only started frequent activities, but the G5 branch has already fought several encounters with them, and suffered heavy losses. Speaking of this, the warring states paused. 5 days, I only give you 5 days, and then you and Kizaru must come back. 5 days. Too little. Akainu frowned and wanted to say something, but Sengoku had already hung up the phone. Boom. Akainu's face was gloomy, and he slammed the table heavily, showing a displeased expression. There are 79 areas in the entire Chambord archipelago, and each area is very large. It is impossible to conduct a thorough search within 5 days. Is greater than or equal to. In a blink of an eye, Akainu understood the meaning of Sengoku. The warring states period did not want them to encounter with those two people again and suffer losses. The reason why they gave them 5 days was to protect his face. Although Akainu felt unhappy with such a move in the warring states period, he couldn't say anything. The strength of those two people is really too strong. If the ordinary navy encounters them, there is only one dead end. 5 days in 5 days, we must find those two bastards. The intensive search was still going on, and it was already late at night in the blink of an eye. In Shachi's bar, Roha quietly got up from the bed and came to the window. After taking out 2 phone bugs from the storage space, Roha first turned on the anti-monitoring before picking up another phone bug and dialing the number. Sir. A respectful voice came from the phone bug. Where are the Tianlong people now? Dragonians have returned to their ship, which is now docked at the pier in Area 62, on the east coast of the Chambord Islands. Number 62. Roha pondered slightly. As far as he knew, number 60 to number 69 of the Chambord Islands belonged to the official station, with a large number of naval stations and some special government piers. He was not surprised that the Dragon Man's boat was parked there. Understood, continue to monitor. After the memory was over, Roha hung up the phone. After taking out a map of the Chambord Islands and identifying the direction, Roha disappeared into the room. 2 minutes later, Roha had already appeared in a shadow on the pier in Area 62. Beside his pier, a gorgeous cruise ship was docked. There are not only a large number of naval patrols around the ship, but even several warships, which firmly surround the cruise ship in the middle. It stands to reason that the distinguished guests of the world government should live in the residence specially arranged by the Navy, but this does not include the Dragon people. For the Tianlong people, the residence arranged by the Navy is too simple, and it is not the place where the nobles of the world should live. So no matter where they go, the Tianlong people will live in their luxurious cruise ships, and refuse to be protected by the Navy, only allowing them to arm around the cruise ship. And today, the morbid pride of the Tianlong people has opened the door for Roha. Just a momentary move, Roha appeared inside the cruise ship, and after a while, he came to a huge living room. The living room is luxuriously decorated, with various precious cultural relics placed everywhere, and even the ground is covered with the fur of some kind of rare beast. In the center of the room, there was a big bed that could fit 7 or 8 people, and a middle-aged man with a mustache who looked to be in his 40s was sleeping soundly. He is also Roha's target this time, the head of the Roswald Holy Family, the Roswald Saint. Walking over, Roha slapped him without mercy. Get up. Snapped. The slap was crisp and sweet, and Saint Roswald sat up with a dazed expression. When he saw Roha, his face was startled, and he subconsciously exclaimed. However, before he could speak, his mind was instantly chaotic, and he had already lost consciousness. A second before Saint Roswald lost consciousness, a system reminder sounded in Roha's mind. Open black lens bracket consume psychological mastery fragments x1 close black lens bracket. Looking at Saint Roswald, who was kneeling on the bed with his eyes blank, Roja smiled with satisfaction and slowly took off the mask on his face. From today onwards, I am your only god. Chapter 110 Conan, Dragon People. Quote. God. My God. No, the celestial beings are noble. No God. No. A struggling look appeared on Saint Roswald's face, and he muttered to himself, as if he was fighting against himself. Seeing this scene, Roja frowned slightly, but did not expect that the inherent concept of Tianlong people was so strong. But so what? With a contemptuous smile, Roja strengthened his abilities again. This time, Saint Roswald no longer struggled and murmured, God, you are my only god. That's right. Roja patted Saint Roswald's face with satisfaction. If those people with strong spiritual perseverance can resist the spiritual manipulation of Shokuho Kauchi, but Tianlong people. Do they have that? Knowing that the fragments are precious, Roja accelerated his spiritual suggestion to Saint Roswald. Are the Tianlong people the most honorable? Yes. Saint Roswald did not hesitate this time, but after he finished speaking, his 11-faced expression murmured to himself, however, the gods are more honorable than the Tianlong people. Is there a distinction between high and low among the dragon people that day? No. Why not? Do you want to share your most expensive with others? Saint Roswald was silent for a moment, then shook his head heavily. I don't want to. Excellent answer. Roja smiled coldly. Then what do you want to do with those celestial dragons who share their dignity with you? I don't know. Kill them, kill all the dragon people, aren't you the most honorable existence? Roja's whisper, like the temptation of the devil, echoed in Saint Roswald's mind. Kill them. A hideous look appeared on Saint Roswald's face, but it dimmed again in the blink of an eye. But no, they will join forces to kill me. As long as they don't find out. Undiscovered. Lord God, what should I do? Saint Roswald murmured in a low voice, his face a little confused. One of the most noble beings among the celestial dragons, he seriously considered how to kill the celestial dragons. The goal is about to be achieved, and Roja's face can't help but show a smile. It's okay, I can teach you. Saying that, Roja turned on the system and found the comics he had been watching recently on the comics storage interface. On the cover of the comic is a little boy in a blue suit, white shirt, gray shorts and a red bow tie. Conan. Using the memory copy without hesitation, Roja transferred all the memories of the comic, Detective Conan, in his mind to Roswald Saint's mind. In order to successfully copy this huge amount of information into Saint Roswald's mind, Roja once again consumed a piece of psychological mastery. After successfully receiving this information flow, Saint Roswald showed a sudden realization. Lord God, I really want to know how to kill them. It's good to know. Roja looked at him with satisfaction, the future #1 murderer of the dragons, and gently pressed him back to the bed. Have a good night's sleep, and when you wake up, you will forget that I have been here, and you will begin your journey to compete for the most honorable position in the world. Saying that, Roja seemed to remember something, and said again, why don't you kill one these days? Who to kill? Saint Roswald was a little confused. Charles Rosin, your naughty son, was very emotional when he heard that he was beaten. This is the perfect time to make an accident. Charles Roja, but, he's my son. Roswald Saint struggled again, this time even Roja could see his pain. What about your son? Will he still take away your position as head of the family in the future? He is your biggest threat at the moment. Do you want to give up the position of head of the family to him? No, the owner of the house is mine, and no one can take it away. Saint Roswald's face suddenly sat up, with a ferocious expression on his face. Kill him. I want to kill him. Anyone who wants to take it away, everyone who is the head of the family will die. Okay, I know your determination. Roja pressed Rhodes 637 Walder Saint back to the bed again. Sleep well, and start planning your great cause tomorrow. Yes, Lord God. Saint Roswald closed his eyes slowly, and after a while, bursts of snoring sounded. In the dark room, Roja stood quietly, the bright moonlight shining on his face along the window. The moonlight evenly divided Roja's face into two halves. One half was holy and pure, and the other half was hidden in the darkness, exuding a gloomy cold glow. What's the point of killing a dragon? Kill them all if you want to. Saint Roswald, I hope you can kill more disgusting draconians before you get caught. Roja muttered to himself in a low voice, and the next moment, his figure disappeared from the room again. Saint Roswald is still sleeping quietly. No one would have thought that such a traitor would appear among the Tianlong people. A traitor who has inherited hundreds of killing methods, knows the flaws in them, and has the thinking to solve the case. Chapter 111 Death in Progress. 3 days later, in Sha Chi's bar. Roja was quietly staying in his room, sitting cross-legged on the bed, closing his eyes and thinking about what he was thinking. After 10 minutes, he slowly stretched out his right hand, and a strange breath suddenly appeared from his body, slowly flowing out, and gradually wrapped around Roja's hand. This breath is the domineering of armed color. As time went by, more and more breaths poured out of Roja's body, and it didn't stop until he was completely wrapped. Perceiving the breath in his hands, Roja closed his eyes and tried to manipulate them. A few seconds later, Roja Huron opened his eyes, and there was a flash of light in his eyes. Armed color hardening. The next moment, the breath wrapped around Roja's hand suddenly shrank, and quickly converged towards the surface of Roja's arm. The more breath condensed, the more difficult it was to manipulate. Until the last step, Roja's mental power could no longer control the breath to condense again. With a stern look, Roja instantly liberated the stigmata, and Roja, whose mental power suddenly increased, worked hard and directly condensed the breath. The dark armed color was domineering and appeared on Roja's arm, but it shattered before it lasted for a few seconds. Looking at the disappearing domineering, Roja twitched the corners of his mouth, released the liberation of the stigmata, and sighed silently. Sure enough, it still won't work. It's still too difficult to completely learn to be domineering in such a short period of time. During these 3 days, Roja has been silently practicing domineering in the room except for the time to eat and sleep. However, the cultivation of armed color and domineering color is not a day's work, and Roja has only mastered some fur. But even so, Roja's training speed also shocked Lele. You must know that even Lele, it took half a month to reach the point of Roja. Thinking of this, Roja couldn't help hooking the corners of his mouth. If Riley knew that he had already returned to the Overlord domineering, I'm afraid Riley would be shocked. After practicing for a few more hours, when I opened my eyes again, it was already evening. Looking at the gradually setting sun, Roja couldn't help but turn his eyes to the east. Speaking of which, Charles R.O. Saint should be dying. Inside the Tianlong People's cruise ship, Charles Luo Sheng took a group of bodyguards and walked towards his room aggressively. When passing a corner, a cabinet that should not have appeared here appeared in front of Charles Luosheng. Not bad, Charles Rosheng kicked it up. Bang, Shan. Whoops. Charles Luosheng sat on the ground, holding his toes and exhaling in pain. Sir, are you all right? The bodyguard on the side hurriedly helped Charles Luosheng up. Go away, useless trash. Roughly breaking free from the bodyguard's hand, Charles Luosheng turned back and slapped him. He turned around and kicked the cabinet next to him. Just now, he accidentally kicked on this cabinet before he sat down. Fuck, who put this cabinet here? Let that guy roll over for me. Violently kicked the cabinet door. Charles Luosheng was not angry when he remembered what had happened in the past few days. Ever since he was knocked out by that damn guy and returned to the cruise ship, he hasn't had a single thing to do. Either he slipped in the bathroom, he kicked something, or he fell on the stairs for no apparent reason, and in the worst case, he almost flipped out the window. All this was blamed by Charles R.O. Saint on the bastard who knocked him out. It must be that guy who made his luck worse. To this end, Charles Luo Saint more than once urged the naval forces of the Chambord archipelago to search, and even asked his father to mobilize a group of navies from the surrounding waters to join the search force. "Bastard, when I catch you, I will make your life worse than death." Charles Luo Sheng gritted his teeth and roared. The pain on the toes gradually disappeared. Charles Luo Sheng looked around, and suddenly roared, "You bastards, haven't you arrested the house where the things are placed? Come here, I have already sent someone to catch it, and it will be here soon." The bodyguard on the side responded quickly. After a while, several bodyguards came over, pressing a young girl with an indifferent face and wearing a maid outfit. "My lord, she is responsible for the cleaning and furnishing work around here." "You put this cabinet?" Charles Luo Sheng asked angrily. "No," an Oriole-like clear and pleasant voice sounded in his ears, and Charles Luo Sheng's complexion suddenly changed. Only at this time did he notice that the maid's figure was very good. The wretched gaze lingered on the girl's graceful figure for a long time, and the anger on Charles Luo Sheng's face was gradually replaced by prostitution. "Make her look up." The bodyguard immediately grabbed the girl's hair and raised her face high, revealing a delicate face. The only thing that was uncomfortable was that the girl's face did not fluctuate in the slightest, and even the pair of emerald green eyes were gray, as if a pool of dead water. When he saw the girl's face, Charles Luo Sheng couldn't help laughing. "A woman I've never seen before, where did she come from?" Charles Luo Sheng squeezed the girl's chin and stroked the girl's face with his fingers, pinching the girl's cheek from time to time. Even if she was treated like this by Charles Luo Sheng, the girl's face was still expressionless and her face was dead. Returning to the Lord, she is a slave offered by the local gang, and her background has been adjusted, so there is no problem. Speaking of which, the bodyguard smiled slyly. Of course, he is still a good man. "Not bad, it's you tonight, just let me put out the fire." While speaking, Charles Rosin took the girl and walked towards his room. In his hands, the girl was dragged away by Charles Luo Sheng like a puppet. Behind him, the bodyguards looked at each other and smiled. They knew that when Charles Luo Sheng got tired of playing with this girl and planned to execute her, they could still enjoy a rare, delicious meal. "I hope the adults can be lighter this time, and don't play bad." That's right, the last one didn't look like a man at the end, and it didn't feel like playing at all. However, the one last time was really beautiful, and it feels like the best looking one I've ever seen. No, why do I feel that last month was prettier? Which one is better last time? If you want a chest without a chest, or a butt without a butt, you have a face. What do you know, it's enough to look good. The most important thing is your body shape. If you turn off the lights, who knows who? The bodyguards quietly discussed while following Charles R.O. Saint from a distance. As for the girl's deadly attitude, no one mentioned it. They have seen many slaves who can't stand training, lose their sense of autonomy, and no longer have any expectations for life. Chapter 112 Murder. Charles Rosin's room. The gorgeous bed swayed and creaked from time to time with the sprint of Charles Rosin's fat body. The slave girl was like a doll, silently enduring all of this. Only the occasional tyranny of Charles Rosin would arouse her groaning from time to time. Seeing that the slave girl would make a sound because of this, it aroused the morbid mood of Charles Luo Sheng, and his behavior was even more violent, and he unscrupulously released his anger on the girl. He didn't notice that the bed was shaking more than ever today. A tuft of silk thread was tied to the leg of the bed, passed through the carpet on the ground, and connected to the long axe in the hand of an armored armor beside the bed. The shaking of the bed became more and more violent, and Charles R.O. Saint was about to reach his limit. With a long roar, Charles Luo Sheng collapsed on top of the girl. Click, click. There was a sound of dense wood breaking, and before Charles Luo Sheng could react, the bed under him suddenly collapsed. Boom. When he was empty, Charles Luo Sheng exclaimed subconsciously, and fell down as the bed collapsed. At this moment, the eyes of the slave girl under him suddenly radiated a ray of brilliance, and she hugged Charles Luo Sheng with all four limbs. Finally 103 reflected. Charles Luo Sheng smiled excitedly, and suddenly there was a sound of metal friction. He sounded like something, and hurriedly turned his head to look, only to see the long axe in the armor's hand by the window, unexpectedly when it loosened, and dumped towards the center of the bed. Charles Luo Sheng's pupils shrank, and he wanted to dodge. At this time, he realized that because of the girl's imprisonment, he couldn't move at all because of his weak constitution. No. Click. With inertia, the chopping axe fell heavily, and slashed directly on the back of Charles R.O. Saint. A bunch of blood splashed, and the axe was heavily embedded in Charles Luosheng's body, causing him to scream loudly. His fat body twitched a few times, and then he stopped moving. Between complete loss of consciousness, Charles Luo Sheng thought about a fact for no reason. This ancient armor was given to him the day before yesterday by his father, Saint Roswald, in order to coax him. Even the position of the armor was placed by Saint Roswald himself. Consciousness gradually dissipated, and Charles Luo Sheng couldn't understand until he died, why the specially made bed collapsed. Why did the long axe in the armor's hand loosen? Sensing that the man on her body was dead, a look of relief appeared in the empty eyes of the slave girl. Mom and Dad, I avenged you. The next moment, a smear of blood ran down the corner of her mouth, and the girl gradually lost signs of life. A few seconds later, the door of Charles Luosheng's bedroom shattered, and the bodyguards filed in. When they saw the scene in front of them, everyone screamed. The entire cruise ship was in complete chaos. No one noticed that Saint Roswald did not arrive at the first time, but hurried to several places and moved some things before rushing to Charles Rose Street's room. Saint Roswald cried bitterly over the body of Charles Rosen, but the corners of his mouth twitched quietly. People's habits are terrible. When going downstairs, if each floor has 10 steps, and suddenly one floor has 9 steps, then there is a high chance that the person will stumble or even fall over. If at that time, put a nail under him. Saint Roswald made a lot of arrangements like this, and he even bought the slave girl who resented the Tianlong people himself. As the father of Charles Luosheng, he knew what Charles Luosheng likes to eat, likes to walk there, and even said what kind of woman he likes and what kind of posture he uses. In this case, it was only a matter of time before Charles R.O. Saint's death. When Akainu arrived after hearing the news, he saw Roswald Saint crying bitterly, and Charles Rosen who was covered by a white cloth. What's the matter? Akainu smelled to the naval major who arrived early. Tisk, it seems to be an accident. The major twitched the corners of his mouth. This Tianlong man was working with a slave when the bed collapsed, shaking the armor next to him, and then the axe on the armor's hand fell off, killing him. So coincidental. Akainu frowned. Have you investigated? Not yet. Saint Roswald keeps everyone from getting near his son's body. The major's face was a little bad. A Tianlong man died within his garrison range. Even if it had nothing to do with him, the Tianlong people would take anger at him. As a major, how could he bear the wrath of the dragons? Demoted or assigned to a dangerous area, it was a sure thing. If he can catch the murderer, I'm afraid he will be able to save some, but is there really a murderer? Seeing the major's gloomy face, Akainu immediately understood the other party's difficulties. I'll take a look. Akainu got up and walked towards the body of Charles Luosheng. But he just took a few steps when Saint Roswald raised his head and scolded, "What are you doing? Check the corpse." Akainu didn't turn his head back and reached out to the white cloth. Snapped. A crisp slap sounded. Roswald Shenglian took a few steps and slapped Akainu's hand away with a grim expression. Navy, have I allowed you to touch my son? Anger rose in his eyes, and a trace of flame rose in Akainu's fist. Akainu stared, staring at Saint Roswald. Seeing someone dared to stare at him, Saint Roswald was even more furious, pointing at Akainu's nose and scolding. What are you doing? You want to attack me? Attack the great dragon people? Huh? What corpse to check? You can't do anything without checking the corpse. What does the government keep you for? Now I order you to kill the man who made this bed immediately. Kill the slave seller too. All who have anything to do with my son's death must die. The anger in Akainu's eyes continued to rise, and the major behind him saw that the situation was not good, and hurriedly came over and hugged Akainu, smiling to Saint Roswald. Yes, I know your lord, let's go right now. The major nodded and bowed, gently pushing Akainu, and whispered in his ear, General, let's go, we have nothing to do with Tianlong people. Humph. Akainu snorted coldly and turned to leave. Behind him, Roswald Saint still jumped and insulted. Boom. The door was slammed shut by Akainu, causing the entire room to shake, and the door made of golden thread wood even showed cracks. General, what should we do? The major followed Akainu with a look of frustration. Akainu was dared to come out by the Tianlong people, and he didn't know what to do in the future. You go and kill the slave trader who brought in the slaves. The rest of the people, you can do it yourself. If there are no bad deeds, let them go away as soon as possible. The farther they go, the better. Got it. The major sighed and nodded. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had already reached the deck, and Akainu seemed to have just remembered it, without turning his head. After this is done, you come to my ship. Huh. The major was stunned for a moment, then his face blossomed with a smile, and he hurriedly saluted Akainu's back. Yes. Chapter 113 Tezzolo was robbed. Chambord Archipelago, 300 nautical miles away, a 3-day pursuit battle is finally coming to an end. The sea was littered with shipwrecks and occasionally shreds of gold leaf. A huge pirate ship was quietly suspended on the sea, and the Sun Pirate flag fluttered in the wind. It was the Sun Pirates led by Tiger. There are dozens of murlocs in the sea, and from time to time a person is picked up from the sea and thrown onto the boat. During the rescue, even if someone still had the strength to resist and tried to attack the murloc, they would be instantly subdued by the murloc's powerful arm. Boss, everyone has been rescued. Jinbei jumped out from the bottom of the sea and came to Tiger's side. Well, please trouble you. Tiger held a thick stack of cards in his hand, a little absent-minded. At this moment, a burly man in a tattered pink suit rushed towards Tiger. But before he could rush to Brother Tai, he was overwhelmed by the murlocs beside him. Seeing Tezzolo's embarrassed appearance, someone immediately sneered. Oh yo, what's wrong with you? Why can't you stand still? Didn't the first 2 days be very good? Golden fruit ability. Golden Emperor. I'm so scared. Ha ha ha, what about the capable ones? The boat broke and was beaten into the sea by the leader of Jinping, or he still turned into a soft-footed shrimp. The sea belongs to the murlocs. You humans still want to oppose us. Over your own power. Some of the fishmen burst into laughter, wantonly venting the unhappiness accumulated in their hearts. In the past few days of pursuit, Tezzolo's ability has caused them a lot of trouble, and even was almost overturned by Tezzolo once. For this reason, more than a dozen of their companions were seriously injured. It had been held back in the hearts of everyone for a long time, and it was only after the defeat of Tezzolo and others that it calmed down a little. Enough. Tiger couldn't stand it any longer and scolded everyone. With his character, he felt a little guilty just robbing Tezzolo, who was once a slave like him, and it is even more impossible for Tezzolo to be insulted now. Jinping, you are responsible for leading people to tie them all up and throw them on a nearby island. As for the capable ones, they should be tortured first and then stunned. Understood. Jinping nodded, reaching for Tezzolo at Tiger's feet. Give me the card back. It's mine. Tezzolo's eyes were red, and he held Tiger's leg tightly. Alas. Tiger sighed. I'm sorry, there is something extremely important to me that needs the help of the Dimension Brigade, so I can't give you the card. Saying that, Tiger knocked Tezzolo out as soon as he closed the knife. If you want to hate me, but I don't know if I can survive this time. Tiger's eyes met death. The fear of death is gradually replaced by firmness. Jinping, take him away. Let's go to the Seven Waters. What? The Sun Pirates actually attacked Tezzolo. When Roja received this information, it was the next morning. When I first heard about this, Roja still didn't believe it. It stands to reason that Tiger and Tesolo didn't have any conflict, and there should be no intersection between the two. What's more, Tiger believes in freedom and liberation, and has sworn that he will never kill anyone. Therefore, the Sun Pirates attacked ships such as slave ships, and always avoided the rest of the ships. So what makes Tiger so perverse? Is it for the card in Tesolo's hand? Roja muttered to himself, and he couldn't think of anything other than this reason. Shaking his head, Roja didn't want to think any more, and when Shadow brought more detailed information, he understood everything. Reaching out and taking out an exquisite roster from the storage space, Roja flipped through it at will. This was taken from Saint Roswald, and it records all the possessions owned by the Holy Family of Roswald. The gold and silver treasures, real estate deeds, and regular tributes in front of him, Roja just swept away, and now he has no interest in these things. But when he turned to the slave roster, Roja took a closer look. After reading through it in detail, Roja took a long breath and leaned back on the chair. The Holy Family of Roswald has more slaves than he imagined. In addition to the nearly 200 slaves in Marijoa, in the rest of the place, every Roswald Holy Family property also has a large number of slaves, waiting for the people of the Roswald Holy Family. When you visit there, feel free to pamper yourself. Maybe there are only a few dozen in one place, and there are hundreds of slaves in a little more, but there are too many real estates under the name of the Holy Family of Roswald. There are nearly 2,000 slaves together. The most uncomfortable thing for Roja is that the replacement of these slaves is extremely fast. Regardless of whether the Tianlong people have seen them or not, the steward responsible for managing the slaves will replace the slaves regularly. Female slaves were often replaced because they were past their prime age or had wrinkles on their faces. And those male slaves are even more miserable. They undertake the hardest and most tiring jobs, eat the worst food, and live in conditions worse than animals. As long as they can't continue to work, the steward will brutally replace them with Shali. And these replaced slaves, if they are lucky, may be taken over by new buyers, and most of them are brutally executed. Even a person with an indifferent personality will be moved when he hears such brutal behavior, not to mention that Roja cannot be called indifferent by nature. It's just that Roja saw something else in addition to his anger at Tianlong's behavior. That is, the population. Draconians are the descendants of the 20 kings who established the world government 800 years ago, which means there are 20 families in total, except for the Alabasta royal family who refused to move into Marijoa, the Neferutali family, and many others. In addition to the Don Quixote family to which Flamenco belongs, there are 18 other families. In their hands, there are tens of thousands of slaves. In addition to the Tianlong people, nobles and merchants from all over the world hold a huge number of slaves. The slaves of the Tianlong people are only for their enjoyment, but the wealthy merchants and nobles are different. In addition to enjoying, they also need slaves to mine mines, log into the forest, and labor for them. The number is amazing. If these slaves are freed, will they become fans of the Benefactor comics? The result is certain. At that time, Roja's fan value income will definitely rise sharply. In the end, we still have to cooperate with the Revolutionary Army. Roja smiled self-deprecatingly. Wanting to rescue so many slaves is tantamount to a slave liberation movement, which is no different from rebelling against the world government. To achieve this, relying on his power alone is far from enough. The Revolutionary Army and other forces that may be attracted must be attracted. Hey, that guy Tiger, wouldn't he want to do that again? Roja suddenly thought. Chapter 114 Tiger's Request. It turned out that Roja's guess was right, and he received a call from Monet in the morning 2 days later. The Sun Pirates have arrived in the Seven Waters. Tiger and Jinpei are waiting for Roja in the headquarters of Dream magazine. In their hands, there is a whole set of trading cards. Is it so urgent? Roja in Shachi's courtyard stopped practicing and activated teleportation. A few minutes later, he appeared in the Dream Talk magazine. Monet, who had been waiting in the hall for a long time, couldn't wait to embrace Roja when he saw Roja. After a short period of tenderness, Monet took Roja to the parlor on the second floor. "Brother, they're inside. Only Fisher Tiger and Jinping are in the house. Do you need me to tell the members to evacuate first?" "No." Roja smiled faintly and pushed open the door of the living room. In the conference room, Tiger and Jinping, who were sitting upright, looked at Roja who came in. "Agent, Roja." Tiger came over cautiously and stretched out his hand to Roja. "Fisher Tiger, just call me Tiger." Roja couldn't help laughing when he saw Tiger, who had assassinated the Tianlong people before his eyes, was so restrained. PFF'd. Ha ha ha. Tiger. Jinbei. What is this guy laughing at? Could it be that there is an error in the outside information? This agent is actually a lunatic. The two tigers were stunned by Roja's sudden laugh. After laughing for a while, Roja took a breath and suddenly lowered his voice. "We've met before." Huh. Hearing this voice, Tiger was stunned at first, then his eyes widened suddenly, pointing at Roja. You are. Jinbei on the other side was even more trembling, and stood up suddenly, looking at Roja as if facing an enemy, and his eyes kept scanning around. He didn't forget that he had attacked Roja, let alone Roja's terrifying strength. Afterwards, they heard that even the General Akainu was cleaned up by Roja and the two of them. With such strength, it was more than enough to kill the two of them. Roja smiled slightly, and it was very interesting to see Jinbei's panicked look. Anyway, Estes will appear in the world sooner or later as a member of the Dimension Brigade. At that time, Tiger will naturally know about the auction house, which is what the Dimensional Brigade did. Instead of letting him find out, it's better to tell him. Let Tiger know that the Dimension Brigade has noticed him, and don't talk nonsense. Don't be nervous, since I told you my identity, I won't do anything to you, or you would have died when you were at the auction house. Roja smiled lightly and motioned Tiger to sit down. Although Roja's words were the truth, Tiger and Jinbei inevitably looked stiff and sat down a little embarrassedly. "Tell me, what do you want to exchange cards for?" Roja asked straight to the point. Tiger hesitated for a while, and finally said, "I want the Dimension Brigade to help me and rescue Mary Joa's slaves again." "Gee, that's it." Roja pouted, and he really guessed it. Pondering for a moment, Roja suddenly asked, "How's your speech on Fishman Island?" Although I don't know why Roja asked this suddenly, Tiger answered honestly. "On Fishman Street, even the royal family's orders are not as useful as my words. But in other places, the royal family still has more power to speak, but my relationship with the royal family is okay. If it is something that will not harm Fishman Island, I believe they will still be happy to cooperate with the Dimensional Brigade." Enough. Roja nodded. "I want the Murloc royal family to fully cooperate with us and promote comics on the Murloc Island." "No problem." Tiger nodded eagerly and agreed, "if it's just this." "Don't worry, I haven't finished." Roja waved his hand and looked directly at Tiger. "I want all the murderous medicine es." "What is that?" Tiger frowned, a little puzzled. At this moment, Jinping suddenly said, "How did you know that thing? You have to know the side effects of the murderous drug es." "Getting old, I know." Roja shook his head indifferently. "You just bring it to me, don't care how I know it." Hearing this, Tiger couldn't help whispering to Jinpei, and after a while he turned his head. "Okay, I'll bring you the murderous medicine es." Refreshing. Roja smiled and stretched out his hand, "Then wish us a happy cooperation." Happy cooperation. After shaking hands with Roja, Tiger couldn't wait. "When will we go to Mary Joa?" Tiger, who is well aware of the miserable life of slaves, naturally thinks that the sooner the better. "Wait a minute, I still have to do some preparations here. It won't be long, at most 3 months. I will notify you on February 4th. "Good." After a few greetings, Tiger and Jinpei left in a hurry. As a person most wanted by the world government, the Sun Pirates can't stay in one place for too long, so they have to leave quickly. After sending Tiger away, Roha went to Yashang Tianjing's research room and returned to Shaqi's bar. Today, he doesn't want to turn against the world government, so when he rescues the slaves, it is absolutely impossible to use any identity in the Dimensional Brigade. Only use swordsmanship and stigmata liberation. In this case, the domineering of the armed and the domineering of the knowledge is an indispensable part. Chapter 115 Win over Dorag. 2 months later, on the west coast of the Chambord Islands, in a reef beach. Roha walked with snow on his waist and stood quietly in a fragmented reef with a satisfied face. In the past 2 months, he has been cultivating two-color domineering, day and night, until a few days ago, when he finally achieved something. In fact, as early as the first month, Roha learned to be domineering, and then successfully completed the hardening of armed color. It was at that time that Roha knew that it turned out that there was a success rate for beginners to harden their armed colors. At the beginning, Roha's armed color was hardened 10 times, and he succeeded once or twice at most, and more often it took more than 10 times to succeed once. It slowly turned into 3 or 4 successes out of 10, and it was only a few days ago that the success rate reached 100%. But even so, this kind of training speed shocked Rayleigh to the point of inferiority. He had never seen such a monstrous guy. And what struck Rayleigh the most was that Roha was not the only one such a monster. I-11sters also learned to be domineering with armed color, and the progress is a little slower than Roha. If Roha knew the reason for Rayleigh's recent depression, I'm afraid he would be speechless. He is not a monster, Estes is. Roha himself, the reason why he cultivated so fast, in addition to Rayleigh's personal teaching, is inseparable from the transformation of Dragon Heart and the ability of Accelerator. With the blessings of many parties, he surpassed Estes. How could he be called a monster? Thinking of Estes's attitude of clamoring to find Akainu to fight again after he learned to be domineering, Roha couldn't help but smile. This belligerent woman. Shaking his head, Roha once again tested the power of the armed color domineering. Armed color hardening. The whole body was shocked, and the next moment, Roha's arms were instantly attached to the armed color domineering, and it became pitch black. Boom! The arms swung, followed by a punch, and a reef with several tons in front of Roha immediately appeared, cracks as thick as fingers. The next moment, the cracks gradually expanded and spread all over the reef. Just a second later, the huge reef had collapsed and spread all over the ground. The armed color is hardened, it is really strong. Roha looked at the power of his punch, and his face was full of satisfaction. Before Roha, when he just learned to armed with domineering, he could only make domineering entanglement and could not harden it. Although it doesn't sound like much, for his current strength, even if it is only increased by 10%, it is a jumping growth. However, the hardening of the armed color gave Roha a big surprise. The degree of hardening was doubled when Roha did not need to be domineering. That is to say, after Roha uses armor color hardening, the power of each blow is twice as strong as usual. Not only that, the defense brought by the hardening of the armed color has also changed Roha's fighting style. The moves that originally needed to be avoided can now be resisted with the armed color, and then fight with the enemy recklessly. If he meets Akainu now, Roha believes that even if he can't kill Akainu, he can still be beaten. Next, Roha tried the hardening of the armed color in different parts again, but the effect was somewhat unsatisfactory. He is a bit slow in using the armor color to harden at the moment, so he can't harden some parts at will, so the hardening range is only the size of 2 arms at most. I have to work hard. Roha shook his head and sighed, but there was indeed a slight smile on his face. After all, this is the first time he has obtained power from outside the system, the power that truly belongs to him. This sense of accomplishment filled Roha's chest. Sitting on the reef casually, Roha took out a special phone bug and dialed the number. Poor RTILYR. After waiting for a few seconds, the phone bug was picked up. Roha. A slightly muffled male voice came from the opposite side of the phone bug, and you could vaguely hear bursts of shouting and killing, as well as scattered gunfire. What about the war? Roha raised his eyebrows, feeling that the call he made was a bit out of time. But after thinking about it, since Drago can answer the phone, it is not a big problem. Roha said immediately, Dorag, I have a big deal here, are you interested? What big deal? Make trouble with Mary Joa and free the slaves. Crack. On the other side of the phone, there was the sound of something being crushed, and Roha could hear the sudden rapid breathing of Drago. How? Are you interested? Yes, I'll talk about it later, I'll fix this side first. After speaking, Drago put the phone aside. The next moment, on the other side of the phone, there was a sudden whistling of the wind, as well as the terrified shouts of countless people. Dorag. It's Dorag. Everyone retreat. Can't run. Fire. Fire. Look in front of you and talk non-stop. Roha twitched the corners of his mouth, simulating the phone bug from time to time. This thing is real, and such a complex voice can be learned. After a few minutes, the cacophony over the phone worm died down. It's been a long time. On the phone bug's side, Drago's voice sounded again. Who is there? When? How's the intelligence gathering going? Drago asked questions in a barrage of cannons, and there was a hint of suppressed excitement in his tone. The liberation of Mary Joa's slaves, if successful, would not only bring unprecedented prestige to the Revolutionary Army, but also bring the most in-demand soldiers to the Revolutionary Army. You must know that among the slaves of the Tianlong people, there are many rare races. The Fur clan, the Long-Legged clan, the Long-Handed clan, the Giants, the Murlocs, these are all existences with natural fighting power far exceeding ordinary people, and these are only a part of them. The most important thing is that in the hands of the Tianlong people, there are an unknown number of slaves with devil fruit ability. Even if it is counted according to one person in each family, there are a full 18 people. If they are rescued, will these slaves who have been abused by the Tianlong people take revenge on the Tianlong people? The answer is yes. You must know that until today, there are still many slaves on the sea who were once rescued by Tiger, harassing the world government and attacking the properties under the name of the Tianlong people. Tezolo is one of the most typical examples, and he still regards the elimination of the dragons as his lifelong goal. Aware of the urgency in Drago's tone, Roha didn't talk nonsense. Where are you now? I'll go to you and have a face-to-face talk. Looking for me, but I'm in the East China Sea now. It's okay, I have a way to go, just tell me where you are. Although he didn't know how Roha got here, Drago still said a string of place names. Okay. Wait a few minutes, I'll be there in a minute. As soon as he finished speaking, Roha hung up the phone. Chapter 116 The Third Plan of the Tripartite. Looking at the hung-up phone, Drago stood there, lost in thought. According to their information, the scope of activities of the Dimensional Brigade has always been near the Seven Waters, and they rarely leave. Could it be that Roha is in the East China Sea now? Or does the Dimension Brigade have the ability to act at a distance? If so, Dorag, what did that guy say? Ivankov came over and asked. He said he came to find me, and he will be there in a few minutes. Drago looked up at the intelligence officer on the other side. Near the kingdom, is there any information about the appearance of the agent Roha? Absolutely not. The intelligence officer replied without hesitation. If the people below find a character of Roha's level, they will definitely report it as soon as possible. It is unknown so far, and I have not received relevant information. Well, I know that everyone started to clean the battlefield, and let the spies search the nearby bailey. If there is any trace of Roha, you must immediately Speaking of which, Drago turned his head suddenly, and when he turned back, his fists were already clenched. However, when he saw the person behind him, Drago's eyes suddenly widened and he was shocked. You. What's wrong? Ivankov's nails suddenly stretched, and he turned his head instantly to block in front of Dorag. As soon as he turned his head, Ivankov couldn't help but froze in place. Yo, long time no see. Roja, who was teleported, greeted with a smile. Teleportation ability. Drago's eyes fluctuated and lowered his eyes, covering up the uncontrollable shock in his eyes. The way Roja appeared is really weird. If it weren't for his knowledge and domineering, he would not have been able to detect the arrival of the other party. If you use this ability to assassinate them. Shaking his head, Drago didn't dare to think about it anymore, but after thinking about it halfway, a deep sense of powerlessness flooded his body, and he was extremely depressed. What the hell are you talking about? Drago changed the subject. Roja shrugged. It means literally. Saying that, Roja looked around. I'll tell you when I've gathered everyone. Well, I was abrupt. Seeing Roja's Drago also reacted, and nodded solemnly. They are now in a battlefield full of gunpowder smoke. From time to time, there are people from the Revolutionary Army carrying the wounded and hurriedly passing by. The personnel are too chaotic, and there may be spies. The Revolutionary Army can insert the Bartholomew Bear into the Chihuahua, and the more powerful Navy can naturally insert spies in the Revolutionary Army. After Drago arranged the affairs in the Revolutionary Army, Roja grabbed him and Ivankov and launched teleportation. Swish. The next moment, the three of Roja suddenly appeared over the Chambord Islands. Before long and Ivankov could react, Roja teleported again, and this time they appeared directly in Shachi's bar. Slam, la. The appearance of the three of Roja knocked down a table and chairs. Shachi, who was busy behind the bar, was no stranger to this situation. These days, Roja would always come back this way after finishing his practice. It wasn't until she was done with the work in her hands that Shachi turned her head with a cigarette in her hand. Roja, you. Blah blah blah. The cigarette in Shachi's hand fell to the ground, with a stunned expression on her face. R.O. Kid Roja, you are really amazing, you can bring anyone. Excuse me. Drago politely nodded to Shachi. Don't bother. Shachi looked at Drago with interest. Being able to meet the famous Drago, it's worth tearing down my little bar. Having said that, after Shachi brought tea to the three of Roja, she made an excuse and went to the backyard. Seeing this, Drago couldn't help but glance at Roja. It's okay, she is trustworthy. Roja smiled faintly. Only then did Drago relax and take a sip of tea. His identity is too sensitive. If someone reports to the Navy, I am afraid that more than one general will come and kill him immediately. By then, the entire Chambord archipelago will turn into a bloody battlefield. 2 or more people with the strength of generals are fighting here. I am afraid that after the battle, the Chambord Islands will be destroyed by most of them. What about the rest? Drago looked around in the bar and asked back. I'm in contact with them. Roja took the phone bug and called Tiger's number again. After learning Tiger's address, Roja brought Tiger and Jin over again. During this period, Estes also came back from the outside, and after greeting everyone politely, he sat quietly next to Roja. The Sun Pirates, the Revolutionary Army, the Dimensional Brigade. Drago looked at everyone present, turned and asked Roja, how many people can the Dimensional Brigade send? Me and her. Roja pointed to himself, then pointed to Estes, because this operation conflicts with the plan in the regiment. There are only the 2 of us, and in unnecessary circumstances, we will not reveal the identity shot. Quote. But Tiger on the side was a little anxious when he heard this. Didn't we agree? We agreed to help you rescue slaves, not to fight the world government. Roja looked at Tiger lightly. I hope you can understand the difference. Tiger stood on the spot, his face was blue and white, and finally he sat down with a self-deprecating sigh. It was only at this time that he reacted. He took it for granted. How could it be possible for the Dimension Brigade and the world government to be enemies at such a small price? The same is true here. In addition to Ivankov and I will also bring some cadres and elite members to assist, no more. After deliberation, Dorag said slowly. Where's the Sun Pirates? Roja turned to look at Tiger. We'll send half of them. The rest of our companions. Tiger sighed again, sneaking into Marijoa and saving the slaves. Even within the Sun Pirates, there are differences. After all, it is the headquarters of the world government, and there are countless strong guards guarding it. Not everyone is willing to die. Until the end, only about half of the members of the Sun Pirates supported Tiger. That's enough. Roja and Drago looked at each other and nodded. The difficulty in saving the slaves, in addition to how to rescue them, is how to make the slaves escape smoothly and stop the chasing enemy troops. On this issue, Roja and others discussed it again. During the period, Roja took out the internal map of Marijoa, as well as a terrifyingly detailed information. After reading this information, everyone present inevitably looked at Roja with amazed eyes. This is the information of the Holy Land Marijoa. Can the Dimensional Brigade also get it? Roja smiled slightly and didn't say anything. St. Roswald's matter is best kept secret. Then the last question. Drago leaned on the table with both hands and looked at everyone. Who will be the commander of this operation? Chapter 117 Death of Hill and Brand. Hearing this, everyone present suddenly fell silent, with different expressions on their faces. In such an operation, there must be a clear commander. If there is no command, everyone will act according to their character. I am afraid that countless people will be killed in minutes, and even the operation may fail. I believe that everyone also knows the importance of unified command, and I hope there will be no emotion in this matter. I am in charge of our side. If anyone has a better candidate, they can put it forward. Drago looked at Tiger. Mr. Tiger once boarded Marijoa and rescued slaves. How about you? Are you interested? I can't. Tiger spread his hands. The last time I rescued a slave had a lot of luck, and I couldn't command this. Cough cough. Roja suddenly coughed twice, and only after seeing everyone look over, did he speak. I hope Estes is in charge here. She used to be a general and has commanded various numbers of troops. General. Hearing this rare term, everyone's eyes suddenly turned to Estes. It was also the first time for Drago to look squarely at Estes, who was sitting beside Roja, and his eyes could not help narrowing into a gap. Estes has a strong momentum, not even weaker than him, but Drago really can't believe that Estes, who seems to be in his teenage years at most, can be a general. What? Don't believe it? Estes glanced coldly at everyone present. It's not that I don't believe it, it's just. Ahem, you understand. Tiger scratched his head a little embarrassedly. Seeing everyone can't believe it, Roja thought for a while, took out the big box that had been prepared from the storage space, and opened it. Let's do it, Dorag and Estes, let's see who is better. Whoever will be the commander. Quote. This is a city. Drago took a careful look at the city in the box, and glanced at Roja in shock. This is Marijoa. Yes, this is the Marijoa model we made. Roja stood up and manipulated the model a few times, explaining the function of the model to everyone. This model was made for this operation, and the interior covers all the streets and facilities of Marijoa, as well as here. Said Roja and lifted a floor of the model. The structure of the sewer is also there. This time, Drago could no longer maintain his high cold aura, and couldn't wait to look around the model, the light in his eyes getting brighter and brighter. It's perfect. Drago turned his head to look at the crowd. If I thought that this operation was less than 30% successful, with this, the success rate can be increased to at least 8%. More than 10. Quote. How did you get such detailed information? Drago looked at Roja with excitement. But after seeing that Roja just smiled lightly and did not answer, Drago blushed. It was me who was abrupt. No one will tell anyone this kind of confidential information. Dorig's question is tantamount to inquiring into the other party's intelligence system. It's okay. Roja shook his head. Then let's get familiar with the sand table first, and then we'll start. Yes. Seeing Drago turning left and right around the model slightly dignified, Roja was not in a hurry, and drank with a cup of tea. At this moment, Ivankov suddenly came over and sat opposite Roja. What's wrong? Roja ran back with some discomfort. There is no way that Ivankov's height is too high. To be exact, her face should be too big, and Roja has to step back to see the other party's face. Hillenbrand just died like this. There is no possibility of resurrection. Ivankov looked at Roja with some hope, his eyes full of expectations. Huh. Roja was stunned for a moment, and suddenly said, "Where is this?" After a while, he realized that it turned out that Ivankov was talking about the plot of Slashing the Red Eyes. Hill and Brand are both members of the protagonist team, Night Attack. Among them, Hill was killed by monsters in order to save his companions, while Brand was killed by poison in battle. The two of them are the first two to die in this anime. Well, these two characters are indeed dead. Roja nodded. Hearing this answer, Ivankov's big face suddenly tangled up. It shouldn't be. How can I die? Really can't be resurrected. Ivankov held the last fluke and looked at Roja expectantly. No. Roja shook his head without hesitation, looking at Ivankov's suddenly gray face, but his heart was a little dark. When he first watched Zanmei, he saw characters die one after another. Forget about the depression in his heart, so he was about to send a blade to the author. He didn't expect to see other people tangled, which was quite refreshing. Don't be sad. Roja suddenly comforted Ivankov. Seeing that Ivankov looked over hopefully again, Roja added, some people will die. Ivankov, if there is an MMP, I must say it. Just when Ivankov and Roja were discussing the plot of killing the sister, the door of the bar was suddenly opened, and then Rayleigh walked in. Silba's Riley, Ivankov exclaimed. Even Dorag, who was studying the model on the side, turned his head and looked at Rayleigh in surprise. There are quite a lot of guests today. Riley sat down without restraint and glanced at Drago. The kid from the Karp family is here too. What are you going to do? While speaking, Riley also noticed the model beside Drago. His eyes fluctuated, and he understood, and immediately smiled. So it's this. Rayleigh is also a helper. Ivankov asked Roja quietly, with uncontrollable excitement on his face. This is Pluto, Silba's Rayleigh, the right wrist of One Piece. If there are people of this level participating, the success rate of this operation will increase a lot. Well, I don't know either. Roja pondered for a moment. I'll ask him. As Roja expected, Rayleigh did not agree. But when he heard that Roja and the others were really going to marry Joa, Rayleigh gave Roja a solemn look. Marry Joa's defenders, it's probably not a problem for you. However, if the 5 old stars take action, what will you do? Chapter 118 Defeated Dorag. 5 old stars. Roja touched his chin. How is their strength? The average strength should be the level of a general, but it is slightly weaker. Rayleigh considered for a moment and said slowly. 5 generals. This time, even Roja couldn't help frowning, because when he crossed over, the 5 old stars in the original book had never moved, so he could not judge the strength of the other party, but he did not expect the 5 old stars to be so strong. I see, we'll plan it out. After talking to Rayleigh again, Drago on the other side finally finished reading the model. Roja, start. Drago nodded. Yeah. When Estes and Drago sat on both sides of the model face to face, Roja began to explain the rules. This time I will be the referee, and the two sides will play the role of Mary Jo as defenders and members of this operation to conduct a simulated operation. After the end of a set, the two sides exchange identities. After starting the operation, the commanders of both sides can only command the information reported below. I will move all the chess pieces. As for the outcome of the outcome, it's up to the two of you to judge for yourself. Both Estes and Drago are arrogant people, and they understand the importance of this operation very well. Roja is not worried about the occurrence of cheating. After explaining the rules, everyone gathered around and watched the battle between the two curiously. In this world, strong battles are common, but this novel simulation method is still eye-opening for everyone. Soon, the first set begins. Dorag is on the offensive side and Estes is on the defensive side. In the case of smearing both eyes, the attackers, under the command of Dorag, successfully rescued hundreds of slaves from several Tianlong people families, but during the escape process, they were accidentally caught by the defenders. The discovery set off the city-wide alarm. Under the command of Estes, Marijoya's defenders were dispatched urgently. When Drago had only rescued half of the slaves, they had already filled the city with guard spies and fully grasped the initiative of the intelligence. The General Aokiji and a 5 old star stationed at the headquarters of Marijoa were dispatched one after another. Verses. During this period, Aokiji encountered everyone from the Sun Pirates. A few minutes later, the Sun Pirates' loss of most of the Jinbei fiasco after the break was captured. A 5 old star intercepted the people of the Revolutionary Army and fought fiercely with Drago, who came to the rescue. After half an hour of deduction, the attackers rescued a quarter of the slaves, and before the arrival of Marin Vando reinforcements, it was completely over after escaping from Marijoa in embarrassment. Woo! It was the first time I saw Tiger playing so nervously. He exhaled a long breath, his face a little solemn. It can be seen that the fiasco of the Sun Pirates made him feel a little uncomfortable. Even if he knew that this action might lead to the loss of many companions, when the death of everyone was placed in front of him, Tiger's mood was inevitably affected. The afterlife is terrifying. Rayleigh smiled and shook his head. In terms of strength, he may not be weaker than Estes and Drago, but in terms of command, he sighs. However, how come there is only 5 old stars? Rayleigh asked. According to the information on my side, at the end of each month, 4 of the 5 old stars will leave and disappear for 3 whole days. Although I don't know what they are going to do, that is our only chance. Roja responded lightly. Turning to look at Estes and Drago in contemplation, Roja, let's continue. For the next afternoon, Estes and Dorag were setting plans to live through the simulation. The strengths and weaknesses of the two are also thoroughly revealed in front of everyone. Drago is acting in secret, and once discovered, his grasp of the overall situation will gradually get out of control. On the other hand, Estes is just the opposite. In terms of stealth operations, she is 1 point weaker than Drago, but after being discovered, she began to show the side of the Iron Queen. Swap pawns for generals, use people who are good at escaping, and use life to hold the strong in exchange for time. Order the strong to use large-scale attacks to destroy ordinary people's buildings, so as to divert the opponent's forces. This kind of means of saving the majority by sacrificing the minority emerge in an endless stream. Although every time such an order is issued, the people around will frown, but the actual result makes them have to accept it. Because that's really the best way. Okay. Roja clapped his hands and let everyone's eyes look at him. The result has come out. I suggest that Estes is the main commander, and Drago is the supplementary commander, and the plan to sneak in early is by 2 people. How about planning together and then handing over the command to Estes? No problem. Tiger responded immediately. Yes. Drago nodded slowly, looking at Estes with admiration in his eyes. He could see that Estes' real command ability should be displayed on the battlefield, not such a city sneaking into the battle. Such talents are exactly what the Revolutionary Army lacks the most. If I can draw Estes over and become a commander. Shaking his head, Drago laughed at himself. It is impossible for any force to give up this kind of talent. What's more, the strength of the Dimensional Brigade is not weaker than that of the Revolutionary Army, and may even exceed a lot. Then, I can only discuss cooperation with the Dimension Brigade. Drago's eyes were obscure, and he didn't know what he was thinking. Chapter 119 Haunt Marijoa. In the morning a few days later, Roja and a group of people involved in the operation gathered on the ship of the Sun Pirates. I have received information from my side that 4 of the 5 old stars have left Mary Joa, and now is the best time for us to act. Everyone must know the danger of this operation, and I don't need to say more. Finally, I wish everyone a safe return. Roja stood at the bow of the boat and glanced at the people with different faces. His eyes were on a white-haired old man with an ancient sword at the back of the crowd, and he stayed for a while. The white-haired old man was brought by Rayleigh 2 days ago, saying that he could help them. The name of the white-haired old man, Roja, is still unknown. He only knows that the other party calls himself Lao Lu and has a great hatred with the Tianlong people. In addition, Roja only knew that the other party was a swordsman, and his strength was extremely powerful. The momentum of the other party was not even weaker than Shank's. With a little emotion, Roja no longer hesitated for the crouching tiger, hidden dragon in this world, and began to take people to teleport. The time for the action is set at night, but because Roja's teleportation can't bring too many people at a time, he has to go to Mary Joa in batches in advance. As soon as the figure flashed, Roja had brought Drago and Tiger to Mary Joa, more than 1,000 meters above the sky. After 2 flashes, the 3 appeared in a huge villa. Where is this? Drago's eyes were vigilant, scanning left and right. A residence of the Dimension Brigade. Roja smiled mysteriously. It's very safe here, you stay here first, and I'll pick up the others. After saying that, Roja disappeared. This time, the transfer with people lasted for a full 2 hours, during which Roja also took a short rest because of the frequent transfer. When he brought the last person over, he sat down on the sofa with some exhaustion. Okay, the few people that were arranged before, put on the clothes over there and go out to set up. Remember, it is better to spend a little more time than attract others' attention. Roja pointed to the luxurious clothes on the side of the hall and began to assign work. A few people walked out of the Revolutionary Army at that time, nodded silently, and began to change their clothes. These people were specially selected by Drago. They looked clean and had no obvious tattoos or scars on their bodies. The most important thing was that they were nimble in their minds and knew how to adapt to changes. When these people walked out with the packages, Roja clapped his hands. Everyone, let's start preparing too. At night, in the villa of the Holy Family of Roswald, Roja stood quietly by the window with his hands behind his back, looking into the distance. How many people have you killed? Roja asked without looking back. P_1. Saint Roswald knelt on the ground with his forehead close to the ground, and replied with some trepidation. Seeing that Roja was silent, Roswald Saint trembled a little. Sir, please don't be disappointed. In fact, there are already 2 other people in my plan. As long as the time comes I will do it. Yeah, Roja nodded. You don't have to do it for a few days, make preparations, and then do it when I notify you. Yes, Saint Roswald responded quickly. The room fell silent again. In Roja's domineering perception of seeing, hearing, and domineering, several figures kept moving in the courtyard of the Roswald Holy Family, knocking down several guards from time to time, quietly opening the door of the slave room, and releasing the slaves. However, at this moment, a piercing siren suddenly sounded above Mary Joa. Immediately afterwards, continuous explosions sounded everywhere in Mary Joa, screams and roars sounded everywhere, and the whole city was in chaos in an instant. Roja raised his eyebrows and smiled lightly. This was one of Esta's plans. Once discovered, they would detonate bombs that were placed everywhere during the day, to disperse Marijoa's forces. Now that the bomb is detonated, it means the battle is about to begin. Roja smiled faintly. At this moment, the stealth operation is over, and the real battle is next. At the same time, below the Red Earth continent, the Marine headquarters Marine Fando. In the Marshal's office, Warring States looked at the information just arrived with a shocked expression. Boom. He slammed the table hard, and Sengoku's face was full of anger. What the hell is going on? Are the events of the past few years going to be repeated? Warring States loudly called out the messengers. Go and call all those stationed in Marinfando and above the rank of Lieutenant General. A few minutes later, Garp, Crane, and Kizaru appeared in Sengoku's office, and besides them there were 4 lieutenant admirals of the Navy headquarters. Warring States, what happened? He asked with a solemn expression. Someone broke into Mary Joa, trying to emulate Fisher Tiger. So that's what happened. Karp clucked his nose and looked unconcerned. Save the slaves, anyway, as long as the Tianlong people keep the slaves for one day, this kind of thing will not stop. Cap, don't say a few words. He gave Karp a white look. Since the Warring States period called us here, it could never be because of this. Although Garp stopped talking, anyone could see the disgust in his eyes. Not only Garp, but everyone present had an unhappy look on their faces. After the last Mary Joa incident, the Navy, under the order of the Tianlong people, dispatched a large number of people to help the Tianlong people hunt down the slaves. In response, there was even a mutiny within the Navy. The Navy, which calls itself the Teacher of Justice, actually helped the Tianlong people to capture slaves. Such an order was unacceptable to many people. Although it was because of the order of the world government, it still caused many Navy soldiers to doubt the justice they insisted on. In the process of arresting, I learned about the miserable life of the slaves, and after seeing those slaves being captured and brutally executed by the Tianlong people, a large number of the Navy who participated in the operation could not bear the inner condemnation. Chose to retire. It can be said that the operation that time caused heavy losses to the Navy, not only in terms of military strength, but also in terms of reputation. Not only did the relationship with various races drop to a freezing point, but even where the world government ruled, the people were dissatisfied with the Navy. For a long time, the Navy called 4.3 the lackeys of the Draconians. And now, thanks to the efforts of Kong and the Warring States period, the reputation of the Navy has only just recovered. Is it still necessary to encounter such a thing again? Thinking of this, Warring States couldn't help but sigh. I know that you are dissatisfied. If this incident was not urgent, I would not have called you. Could it be that there was a problem with the robber this time? He thought for a while, then raised his head and asked. Yes. Sengoku's face was solemn. According to the information I have just obtained, in addition to the Sun Pirates, the Revolutionary Army also appeared in this robbery, and some people even claimed to have seen Dorag. Dorag. Everyone's eyes subconsciously turned to Garp on the side. Bah! Karp spat out the toothpick in his mouth and smiled proudly. That stinky boy, you did a good job. Chapter 120 The Transformation of the Green Pheasant. Turning his head to look at Sengoku who was glaring at him, Karp provocatively said, Look at what I do. Let's agree, I won't participate in this shit. You. Warring States stared, but still didn't say anything. Warring States ordered. You are the fastest, go to support Mary Joa now, and the reinforcement fleet will arrive later. Understood. Huang Yuan responded lazily, turned his head and left. What about Mary Joa? He asked worriedly. Today is the day when the 5 old stars went to see that lord. As for defensive strength, don't worry. Warring States waved his hand. Apart from Aokiji, that old man is also on vacation at Mary Joa, so he should be able to support it for a while. On the streets of Marijoya, Roha, who came out of the Holy Family of Roswald and wandered around, happened to meet the person who was spoken of by the Warring States period. Seeing the person standing in front of him, Roha scratched his head with a headache. Marshal Kong, why are you here? Sneaky fellow, are you the robber this time? Sora looked at Roha, whose face was covered by Mask 11, and his arms instantly turned black. Go ahead and capture it. That doesn't seem to work. Roha smiled slightly, took out the snow and walked away, with a warlike expression on his face. I just want to see how strong the commander-in-chief of the 3 armed forces is. Combat is imminent. At the same time, on another block, a raging fire ignited a row of houses, and countless people screamed to avoid it, and more navies kept bringing in water, trying to put out the fire. Where's the water? Bring the water. Hurry up and save people. There are still people inside. Stop chasing slaves. It's important to put out the fire. At this moment, a burst of cold air suddenly appeared, countless ice condensed, and the fire in the entire block was extinguished in an instant. This is... A navy stared at the scene in front of him dumbfounded, turned his head subconsciously, and hurriedly saluted when he saw the person walking by, General Qingzi. Yeah, Qing Pheasant put one hand in his pocket, the other hand grabbed the coat over his shoulder, and nodded lightly. You continue to hunt down the robbers, here I am. Yes. After hearing Aokiji's order, the naval soldier no longer hesitated, turned his head and ran to the other side of the street. Aokiji, on the other hand, kept walking and continued to move towards another burning building. Aokiji constantly shuttles through burning buildings one after another, constantly using his abilities to put out fires. During this period, the phone bug in his pocket rang several times, but Aokiji just raised his eyebrows and was not interested in answering. You don't need to pick him up to know that it was an order to urge him to arrest the criminal, but in his eyes, saving people is much more important than catching the criminal. Just when he walked to the fourth block, there was a sudden noise in front of him. Aokiji frowned and walked over. I saw a few navy, surrounded by 2 teenage slaves, trying to subdue them. The 2 slaves were covered in blood, slender. Under the capture of the navy, they dodged left and right. Even if they jumped over the burning planks and burned the soles of their feet, they would not let the navy catch them. However, in front of the well-trained navy, they were still too weak, and they were gradually besieged in a corner. Don't come here. Don't come here. A girl who looked older, holding a dagger, shouted hysterically. Beside her, the smaller girl had tears all over her face, looking at the surrounding navy in horror. Little girl, put down the knife, don't be impulsive. Seeing the girl look like this, the navy on the side couldn't bear it, and stopped his companions from continuing to approach. We won't hurt you, you put the knife down. Put it down. The girl suddenly laughed frantically. Ha ha ha, put down the knife, where are you taking me? Go back to the Tianlong people. The girl's hysterical expression and her scarred body made the sailors speechless for a long time, and some even lowered their heads and dared not look at the girl again. Sister, I don't want to go back. The young girl hugged her sister timidly, her tender voice full of unease. Don't go back, Leah is good, we won't go back again. The girl held her sister in her arms, a look of determination flashed in her eyes. The next moment, she suddenly waved the blade in her hand and stabbed her sister's heart. Don't. The Navy soldier was shocked by the scene in front of him and even forgot to act. However, just as the blade was about to pierce her sister's body, her sister suddenly found that her hand had been caught. Let go of me. You let me go. The elder sister struggled frantically, biting on Aokiji's arm, leaving drops of blood along Aokiji's arm. The young sister was also frightened by the scene just now, and sat down on the ground and howled helplessly. Why? Qingzi lowered his head, controlling his instincts, not letting his arm turn into ice, and letting the other side bite him. Bah! My sister spat out a mouthful of blood. We are dead. We won't be caught by you and taken back to the Tianlong people. That's it. Qingzi sighed, and suddenly stretched out his hand to knock his sister unconscious. Before her sister could react, she was also knocked unconscious by Aokiji. Admiral Aokiji, the Navy soldiers walked over 300 years ago. They handed it over to me, and you continue to put out the fire. Qingzi gave an order, one in each hand, picked up the 2 sisters and walked towards the distance. Yes. The soldiers saluted and respectfully watched Aokiji's departure. What only puzzled him was that the direction Aokiji walked was not the most chaotic neighborhood, but the port. Captain, are we still arresting? Someone came over and asked. The Navy on the side also stared at the captain, their eyes fluctuating, and the expressions in their eyes were different. Arrest? Arrest for what? The captain curled his lips, Arresting slaves is not as important as fighting fires. Let's fight fires, not arrest slaves. Yes. Captain is great. The Navy soldiers swept away their previous malaise and cheered. Such a situation not only occurs here, but also occurs in various areas of Mary Joa. In the naval forces that believe in justice, from time to time, for various reasons, people will give up catching slaves and start putting out fires instead. Even if some people see the slaves running by, they will turn a blind eye, and even more will guide the slaves to the place where the large army of slaves gathers. In the Navy, justice lies.